Welcome to Midwest Paranormal Presents Paranormal Soup. I'm your host, Jason Bland. Tonight's guest is a returning guest, one of my favorite guests, one of my favorite authors, especially in the UFO field, Paul Blake Smith. We had him on last time to talk about his wonderful book I highly recommend, President Eisenhower's Close Encounters. We had him on for his MO-41, the Missouri 1941 UFO encounter book as well. I highly recommend. Tonight, I've been waiting for this book. It took me a while to get it. But I ordered it last week, been reading it up till tonight, and I'm almost done with it, is the Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter, which I've gotten into a little bit with Paul, talking about it over the last two times we've had him on, because you can't help but talk about it a little bit, because it's one of the most notorious, if you're into ufology, lore, that Paul really delves into and gives you the facts and the history that he can pull up. And really paints a picture of, what could have been or what might have happened. Because this is one of the greatest stories, if you don't know it, in UFO lore. Is that President Nixon took Jackie Gleason in February 19th of 1973 to Homestead Air Force Base to see 4 dead alien bodies. And then he told his ex-wife, or his wife at the time, and she told everybody. And that story's lived on, and man, it's come up on this show so many times, and this is a whole book on it. I've never had a book on this classic piece of UFO history, and Paul has done an excellent job. I totally love it. I highly recommend it. We're going to get into that. We'll open up the phone lines later in the show, of course, where you guys call in questions tonight. Definitely call in. I'm going to give out a Google number later tonight when I have the phone lines, guys. If I can get somebody to call in on that line, I'm trying to test that line out before I lose it, so that'd be a help. And then the World Wide Web of Weird. My God, there's so much weird. I even have exclusive UFO footage given to me by a listener. I want to thank out there, David Brown. Thank you for sending me that. We'll show that tonight here in a few minutes. So we got a lot to get to, so let's go ahead and get rolling on into it. Welcome to another night of Paranormal Soup. As I said before, I'm your host, Jason Bland. Tonight, our guest, Paul Blake Smith, is actually going to join us for the World Wide Web of Weird, and I'm so happy because I have so much UFO stuff in it tonight. How you doing tonight, Paul?
Why, I'm doing just fine. If I can unmute myself there.
You can unmute. It's an honor to have you back on the show, Paul. I really enjoy you every time you're on. I really highly recommend your books. Honestly, I mean, you're covering my favorite parts of UFO history so far. When you get into the Eisenhower and the alien meeting, supposedly that happened, and the Nixon-Gleason story are two of my favorites. And to have these books, I mean, I got them both. I need to get your first one in a copy here. I got that one on digital, but I need to get a copy of that one, I think. So it's an honor to have you back on. Like I said, we got a lot of, feel free to comment in the World Wide Web of Weird. We got a lot of UFO stuff to get to in that. Joining me as always is my beautiful co-host, Jamie D. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Doing well, thank you.
Glad to have you back on. Enjoying your much warmer California weather than my -2 degrees here, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Also joining me from somewhere way warmer than here, from St. Augustine, Florida, Rob Autry himself. How you doing tonight, Rob?
Oh, okay. It's like 48 here.
Yeah, rub it in. It's -2. But for you Florida people, it's like, oh my God, it's so cold.
Exactly.
Us people like Paul here and me, you know, we're Midwestern freezing our butts off right now.
No.
But, you know, enough complaining about the weather. We got a lot of weird to get to, so let's go ahead and roll into the World Wide Web of Weird. Tonight on the World Wide Web of Weird, we're going to start off with the continuing story of the supposed disclosure and movings and goings-on with UAPs or UFOs in our government. This new one, proposed UAP bill would allow civilian pilots to report UFO sightings. Because right now they've just been taking information from the military sightings, people in the military. Now they're going to take reports from civilians. Why wouldn't they before? For those listening on the Paranormal Soup Radio Network, we are a webcast that streams live out to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And we do have some great stuff you might want to visually see tonight for the World Wide Web of Weird. But if you want to listen, I'll narrate as best as possible. So yes, first up here, let me get the screen. There we go. All right. Proposed UAP bill would allow civilian pilots to report UFO sightings. Earlier last year, Pentagon launched a website enabling military personnel and other government workers to report sightings of unidentified aerial phenomenon, or UAPs, dating back to 1945. It only took them a year to put the website together. The move was a response to official hearings on the subject, which saw military pilots provide their own testimonies about sightings of unexplained objects off the east coast of the United States. But while the new reporting system was great for military personnel, it did not offer the great public or even civilian pilots and air crews the option to report anything they might have seen. Sponsored by Robert Garcia, Representative Glenn Grothman, the new bill aims to change that by creating a reporting mechanism for civilian pilots as well. UAP transparency is incredibly important for our national security, which is why we need to create a space where those in aviation have the ability to report their findings and experiences, said Garcia. The bill is another step forward to disclosure and provide a safe process for UAP reporting by civilian and commercial personnel. If the bill does not pass, it will also require the FAA to share any information, or if the bill does pass, it will also require the FAA to share any information relating to cases with the AARO, All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, so they can be investigated further. The bill is a crucial initiative that empowers those on the front lines of our skies to contribute valuable intelligence regarding UAP sightings that can help ensure the potential threats are thoroughly investigated. And, you know, in airlines, they've tried to shut down pilots. Most pilots, for many years and decades, would not report anything like that they saw if they didn't have to, because they didn't want to be grounded.
Didn't they also have to sign NDAs?
I don't think those pilots ever signed NDAs. I think it's just enough of a threat of being grounded or losing their job. They didn't care what they said after they left the airline, I think.
It reminds me of my book. I did some research for the Eisenhower encounter of mid-February of 1954. You remember in that they just happened to have a story in the news. All airline pilots are going to not report what they see, anything unusual. It's just days before this planned Eisenhower thing. It made the news that pilots keep their mouth shut and don't report things.
And it's for people like me who I'm fine with flying, but the moment people start talking about seeing UFOs up in the sky, I'm not little. That's the only. I've been a great, comfortable flyer, but the one thing I don't want to do is see a UFO while I'm on the plane. I want to see it when I'm solidly on the ground. So next up, speaking of pilots and UFOs, this is from I got from Coast to Coast. I think the original article, if you pull up the next one, will show what it's from. Is a pilot reports 30-foot tall triangle. Oh yeah, what is it? Newsweek, yeah. Pilot reports 30-foot tall triangular object flying past an aircraft. Originally from Newsweek article, but I got Tim Binnall's from Coast to Coast, a little summary here. Remarkable air traffic control recording from last month features the moment when a puzzled pilot reports that a 30-foot tall triangular object just flew past his aircraft. The strange incident reportedly occurred December 20th during a flight from Pittsburgh to Maryland. As can be heard in the audio, at around 50 miles northwest of his destination, the pilot contacted the nearest air traffic control tower, and a rather curious conversation followed. We observed something approximately 30 feet tall. He reported to the operator, who did something of a double take and asked for him to confirm the size of the odd object. It was pretty tall, probably about 30 feet tall. The pilot reported nothing, noting that it was going the opposite direction of us. When inquired as to what the mysterious object looked like, he expressed some difficulty in describing it before indicating that it was just a tall and pointy. At the suggestion of the aircraft controller, the witness goes on to report that it was in the shape of a triangle. It was in the bottom and flat on. It was bottom and flat on top, before ultimately conceding that I'm not sure what it is. The pilot later says that the object was far enough away from the aircraft that it did not appear to pose any danger to the plane. Again, I would be very nervous. I think I have a little bit of the audio recording of that. I think I should play some of it. Let's see here.
At about 6,800 feet. You said it was 30 feet tall? It was pretty tall, probably about 30 feet tall. It was going opposite direction of us.
Yeah, that's not what I want to see. As much as I would love to see a UFO, I don't want to see what I'm on a plane.
Hey, Ronald Reagan saw one that way on a short flight near Bakersfield, and even his pilot talks about it, I think, to this day, that they saw this lit object. It was bright in the night sky, came up from behind and went parallel to their like Cessna, small airplane, and Reagan saw it and said, wow, let's follow that for a while, and they did. And he was all excited about it. So
yeah, I would not
attack him.
Good old Gipper. He gets man is America. You know what I'm saying? Go follow that UFO. Me, no, I'm like, go the opposite direction.
Yeah, and I think his pilot was like a former Air Force pilot. He trusted this guy, so when he
was governor, this is when he was governor of California, wasn't it?
Yeah, and he says this happened. Well, what are we supposed to believe? That Reagan never denied it.
No, I mean, yeah. Reagan said some interesting stuff to people in private, according to the UFO lore. We can get into that. We don't want to get off topic here, but we'll get to that later.
Okay.
All right, next up, speaking of pilots and stuff online, are we shooting these things down? That's the question we've talked about on the show. Do these images, this is from Unexplained Mysteries, I have this. Do these images show a UFO being shot down over the U.S. in early 2023? Back in 2023, there was a spate of incidents involving unidentified objects being sighted and subsequently shot down around the United States. The first, which was described as a Chinese spy balloon, was down February 4th. Then over the following weeks, three more objects of unknown nature and origins were downed over Alaska, Canada, and the Great Lakes. Exactly where these objects exactly what these objects were has remained a topic of heated debate, but now an anonymous submitter has contacted us with a series of photographs allegedly showing one of these objects being shot down. I'm sure you understand I'm unable to give you any specific data regarding the information above. All this information is still highly classified. Have you ever asked yourself this? Has anyone ever seen any proof of these so-called balloons that were allegedly shot down? Any photographers or any actual evidence of any of the recovered remains of these objects? You know the power of suggestion is a very powerful thing. Just tell them it was a weather balloon or a spy balloon or some other type of mundane man-made object, and they deny everything. And these are the photos. I don't know if you can zoom in on it, but it's just a 3 stills. Like you can see one with probably a raptor up there with an object. Raptor would be the smaller one, and then kaboomy. Do you really think we could shoot these things down?
If
Paul?
they're spy balloons, yeah.
But if they're actually extraterrestrial.
No.
No,
Probably
that's
not.
fine.
Yeah.
But remember what I told you about the redacted YouTube channel, about the interview they just did a few hours ago with a guy talking about a Lockheed Martin reverse engineered craft being shot down in somewhere in Nevada, and then they got in a firefight with a JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, military personnel over the object because they thought they were terrorists or something, because this was 2003 or something like that, or 2004. And 2 military personnel from JSOC got murdered or killed. Yeah, that's our military industrial complex. Got their own little private military fighting with our military. Anyways, moving on. What Jackie Gleason say? How sweet it is.
Very good.
All right, let's move on. All right, of course, now this is probably the most viral thing going around when it concerns UFOs right now. Not the photo. We'll go to that in a second. That's from Space Wolf Research. Go to the video. The jellyfish UFO from Jeremy Corbell. Jellyfish UFO spotted in leaked U.S. military footage, ordered to hunt it down. Buried military footage has revealed a mysterious UFO which can only be seen on thermal camera flying over a U.S. base and then going from hot to cold in color. A video has emerged as a UFO speeding across the skies of Iraq, with an investigating filmmaker claiming, that's Jeremy Corbell, from the U.S. military, and that troops were ordered to hunt it down. The flying object is seen changing colors from black to white as it sweeps over a military base. The black and white is the temperature because it's thermal. And filmmaker Jeremy Corbell claims the object then dived into the lake, which I have not seen that footage, staying under the water for 17 minutes. He said it resurfaces and hits the sky again at a 45-degree angle. The investigator also said that the leaked video was captured in the U.S. military in 2018, showing it with a stiff hanging legs, making it look like a jellyfish. For those listening on the radio, if you have not seen this, you're not on social media, or don't follow any UFO pages because you can't miss it. It's all over the place. It does. And Jamie, you were saying that you saw a video, and I think I saw it, where a guy kind of filters it and makes it look like they possibly could be a guy in a jetpack suit.
You can see the helmet, almost like the gas mask type helmet with the long hose.
I zoom in more on it,
but how it could go in underwater even.
You can see what would be legs and how they would bend in that dark area by the knees and then dangle down a little more. I don't see any arms, though.
Well, they're kind of on the side.
They hold it like this, don't they?
Yeah. I mean, just think about this. Another great, I'm giving a big shout out to Redacted Video Channel. The YouTube channel is one of my favorite channels. Had a guy on, and I talked about this last week, who went down to Peru with talking about how these people are being taken by these alien-like creatures, but they're not. They're speaking Spanish, and they sound like they could be some kind of military op on these hoverboards, and they're hovering and flying off into the ocean and trying to take this one young girl in one instance. You know, it's like, what are we using the military op? I mean, what kind of great way for a Navy SEAL to get into a hidden op than something that's cloaked, because nobody could see it with their eyes. They can only see it on thermal. It could fly in and out of the water, drop them, and then this thing floats up, comes back down, picks them up, they hover away. You know, one single person on a mission, James Bond style.
A lot are used for rescue missions to get people off of hillsides and hard to reach places.
We got to move on, but I'll go to the picture really quick. I'm going to give a shout out to Space Wolf Research, is a Facebook page, posted this. I don't know if you can zoom in on this. A lady posted this several months ago, like in July or something of this last year, and saw this. If you go read the description there in a second, that has some very similar features. I remember seeing this when she posted, and I was wondering where it was at. I was trying to find it, and these things slipped by me, and I was even looking through my World Wide Web Weird to see, did I cover this? But I remembered seeing somebody else had something similar to this jellyfish thing. I couldn't remember where. Well, thank you, Space Wolf Research posted on their Facebook page this post by this lady, what she saw, and this has some very eerie similarities, especially with the head, and there's kind of like the horn and the eyes, things that people take notice of with the jellyfish, and this seems very similar. All right, we got to move on. We're going to run out of time, because the next one up is my favorite kind of story in the World Wide Web of Weird, one where I'm given it exclusively from a listener. Thank you, from David Brown. This is what he says about this before we watch it. This video was taken by my friend's wife last Sunday evening in eastern Sequoia County of Oklahoma. I vouch for its authenticity, but we have no idea what it is. Use as you wish. Go ahead and play. And there's this audio with this. Now, it's a little odd, but wait what it does here. Now, watch. It, like, splits off something in front. Like two little orbs, kind of. And they spread, and then there's more. It's weird. Like I said, this was Sequoia County, Oklahoma. Last Sunday is what he said. He gave this to me yesterday. Again, thank you, David. I love when somebody gives me this stuff. This is awesome. I don't know what that is, though. I can't tell your friend's wife what that is that they saw. Any thoughts from the panel? It's
just so vague. It could be satellite or some sort of man-made object, but it doesn't move very much. I wonder, is the cameraman also moving, like in a car?
No, I don't think so. This is all the information I have, but it doesn't appear like he's moving a car. It appears this thing's moving over the horizon. And then it does that. Now, I put it in a filter just so you can get an idea of
if it was a search helicopter in the fog, we would probably still see like a flicking.
Well, that's just when I put it in the filter, just so you can see what's happening here. You see that?
Yeah. And even the little round orbs disappear.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like little drones?
I don't think so. It looks pretty big, too, doesn't it, to you guys? Like, whatever that is, seems pretty big.
That looks big. That looks like the moon almost.
Yeah. I mean, it looks pretty big. I don't know. All right, we got to move on, though, because we got 2 more articles and more videos with both of these. All right, so when we're going to do the last 2 are going to be strange creatures, since everybody's still talking about the stupid Miami thing. Yes, I call it stupid because I've not seen anything to me that's credible evidence that something actually happened in Miami. I've seen a lot of the people come out with TikTok videos. I've seen 2 people come out with TikTok videos say they saw stuff there and then come out later, take the video down and say they were trolling. You know, I don't know why people do it for clickbait. But our people are seeing strange creatures. We have the Nevada incident, of course. I was just talking about the Peru deal going on. Of course, that could be a military op. Maybe all of it is. But people are seeing strange stuff everywhere, and sometimes it's Bigfoot. I don't know if this one was, or if there's a guy in a suit, or whatever. But this is one from a strange bipedal creature, and I got this from Coast to Coast. Seen watching hikers in Chile. Very weird video from Chile shows the moment when a pair of hikers seemingly stumbled upon a strange bipedal creature that appeared to be watching them from atop a hill. According to local media report, the curious sighting occurred on the morning of December 31st as 2 friends were ascending a site known as Cerro de la Virgen in the city of Talca. The duo neared the summit of the hikers, turned to film the skyline below them. When they spun the camera back around, their peaceful morning adventure suddenly took a unsettling turn as they spotted a dark figure emerging from behind a tree at the top of the hill. Go ahead and play because we're going to run out of time here. Mute this one because it's going to have that stupid music in the background. I forgot. They don't speak English anyway, so I don't know what they're saying. Maybe somebody else would. Sorry. You can go find this video in a number of places. Go to Coast to Coast AM. They'll have the link there. Yeah, it's like he steps out. Is this a guy in a suit? Up here. Here he goes. This is it. Steps out behind the tree, turns, looks. It's a guy in a suit. I don't know. Definitely the reaction seems genuine. Like, what the heck is that? And they get nervous. I wish you could play the audio. I don't know what they're saying, but you can tell they're excited and like, what the hell?
Are they chasing it down?
No, they are going away from it.
Oh.
To me, that seems like the natural reaction. That could be a guy in a suit.
That's a guy in a suit.
That's what it seems like to me. Now, tell me about this last one, because this one, even Dan Bongino, the conservative talk show host, was talking about this and showing it. You saw that because you shared that Dan Bongino episode with me. Was talking about this last one, and this is weird. I don't know what to make of this. I got it from the New York Post. 10-foot tall strange being seen traversing Brazilian island as alien rumors swirl. New video shows 2 giant human-like creatures strolling along the foothills of a small Brazilian island in what some to believe is proof of aliens visiting our Earth. One of the 10-foot-tall beings appears to take in the sights of Ilha de Domel, an island 2 miles off the coast of southeast Brazil, as another stands closely behind, the footage shows. They stand confidently on top of the hill, which locals say is difficult to reach, with the shrubbery barely reaching their knees. The pair could be seen swinging their arms in an eerily human-like manner, but not enough to convince eyewitnesses that they weren't watching aliens. It's too big to be a person, one person says in a video, according to the translator. So they translated the people talking. They're like, that's too big to be a person. On top of the hill. Go ahead and play it. I tried to find like the original video and all that. I could not. I had just everybody else's versions of it. So this one has several different zooms and filters on it. And I do a zoom in the video.
TMZ ran this story. And
yes.
Like a day or so later, a basketball player came forward and said, that's me and a friend. That's all it was. We were taking a picture. It's just a tall basketball guy. If it is,
I saw that
rather oddly.
I'm like, but is that it? Is that really what happened? I'm just saying, what is going on? Like last week, I said that the whole Miami thing. I said this to Paul Anthony Wallace we had on, the other Paul, that all they need to do, like, are they doing a PSYOP test to see how we would react to the idea of 10-foot-tall aliens rocking around? Because we had the Las Vegas thing. Story, and then this Miami thing. All they had to do is put a meme out there and let the internet eat itself. You know,
or people just get this footage. They see like a tall man out there and like, hey, from here it almost looks like it could be this. Let's just turn it in for clickbait. See what happens.
There's more film of this I've seen too. Where later after I made this, that of it like walking through a town or like something, like you can almost see it better, but you'd think they'd know if that was a person. Then you know. Maybe they're just all short people on the island, and the tall basketball player looks like an alien.
And if they could produce like their,
I mean, it does look like he's taking a picture. Yeah. I mean, it totally looks like somebody taking a picture.
How many aliens come landing and then start taking pictures and check their cell phone?
Right?
I just want to know where people get such crappy phone cameras at.
Yeah, you know? Can't you get focused or get closer than that?
I mean, my iPhone 5 can take a better picture.
Well, you got to think when you're trying to film daylight on on a cell phone, it's got a small iris, and you're trying to zoom in on something, an object in daylight, the distance. Yeah. Now, the newer cell phones are definitely better, but you know this is South America, so I'm sorry. That's it for the Worldwide Bubble Weird. Our guest tonight is Paul Blake Smith. We're going to be talking about his newest book, The Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter. Cannot wait to get into this. I am thoroughly enjoying the book. Yes, got my copy here. Like I said, I need to get your first book. So I have the edition of these 3 books because I honestly thoroughly enjoy these kind of books. This is my jam of reading because I love history and I love the UFO lore. And Paul, you've done an excellent job of tying all this together and raising questions. And I can't wait to get into this with you tonight. And you guys can too. Later in the show, we'll open up the phone lines. Call in the show with your questions tonight with our guest, Paul Blake Smith, after this short commercial break.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday at the live stream with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Of the second kind, physical evidence of a UFO. Close encounters of the third kind, contact. From Steven Spielberg, the director of Jaws, comes one of the most ambitious and unusual films ever made. And what you will see has never been seen before. It's a cosmic mystery crossing what many scientists believe will be the next threshold of human experience. It is called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It begins in an Indiana town and leads to one inescapable conclusion. We are not alone. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Certificate A. Now showing at the Odeon, Leicester Square.
The international chart-topping, Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest has been described as terrifyingly real, a must-read, shocking and chilling brilliance, genuinely worrying, utterly frightening. Don't read before bed. Described as one of the spookiest writers out there, best-selling author G.L. Davies presents Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest. The true paranormal account that is shocking the world. Dare you enter? Dare you read? Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and wherever books are sold. Pray you never have to live there.
This is the sound of a space clock aboard a U.S. satellite 180 miles above the Earth. No one winds up this timepiece. It's powered by a tiny battery, a battery that delivers power for years without replacement. Now the same type of battery, the Duracell battery, can bring new reliability and long life to your battery-operated equipment. Radios, cameras, toys, all run far longer. Duracell batteries, the long-distance power cells, outlast any ordinary battery. The same type of battery that keeps space clocks running for years can bring long life to anything powered by batteries. Dura, as in durable. Cell, as in power cell. The Duracell battery, made by Mallory.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Switch to DCS ranging.
240, nominal to profile.
We're in the pipe. 555.
Tonight on Paranormal Soup, our guest is Paul Blake Smith. Paul Blake Smith is the sole author of the Nixon-Gleason alien encounter, just as he was of the President Eisenhower's Close Encounters, both from foundationbooks.net. The first one was a bestseller with over 130 positive reviews from Amazon. He has also earned a book deal via Cantor.com. Paul previously authored the popular nonfiction book MO41, The Bombshell Before Roswell, The Case of the Missouri 1941 UFO Crash, and Three Presidents, Two Accidents, More MO41 UFO Crash Data and Surprises, released at the opposite end of 2016. Paul is this is Paul's fifth nonfiction UFO book and his seventh book overall. Mr. Smith was a four-year mass communications major with an English minor at Southeast Missouri University in his hometown of Cape Girardeau, Missouri. A fan of history, sports, and the paranormal, Paul spends his days writing mostly nonfiction books that can be found on the internet through his website, www.mo41.info. He's on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Pinterest, plus 2 publishing websites listed. We'll share the links in the chat later in the show. Our guest tonight, I am highly honored to have back on. I am truly enjoying this newest book, The Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounters, one of my favorite alien lore, UFOlogy lore stories. And I really believe it happened, and Paul really makes a convincing case, I think, of this in this book. So we're going to get into that, and we'll open up the phone lines later in the show. But let's go ahead and get to our guest. Like I said, Paul, it's an honor to have you back on the show, and I am truly enjoying this book. I was gobbling up. I got it this last week. I don't get a lot of time to read, but I was using every moment I could to read through this book, and I've enjoyed it. Probably I don't know. I love all 3 of your books, and especially the Eisenhower book. But I am really think this might be one of my favorites you've done.
I'm glad you like it. My publishers insisted on putting in all of this source notation that kind of clutters it up, slows it down, but there's nothing much I could do. It was either follow their directives or I don't get a book. But I think it came out pretty well. And I was also able to publish like 8 or 9 key pages of a document that was inexplicably left off my Eisenhower book. So we got to put this in. It fit perfectly. It talked about what happened in the 1970s regarding human alien contact at Air Force bases, and that's Nixon's time. So that was the time of what they call King Richard and his imperial presidency. He was incredibly powerful back in the early 70s. All previous presidents had passed away by 1973, and Nixon was king of the hill. Even J. Edgar Hoover and Allen Dulles from the CIA, and other notable figures, they're all dead, and he can do anything he wants now, and this is what he did.
Most of the people that were involved in the original Majestic 12 supposedly were dead at that point too. I love that. Yeah. I love that you point this out in the book. You go through this of all these different people and their their probably involvement in the UFO program. How they had all this was like the perfect time for this encounter to happen with Nixon and Gleason, because he was almost the man at the top in charge of things. Probably one of the last presidents to really have power or control in this area.
Right. The 2 people who were in charge of Homestead Air Force Base, the site that Nixon went to all the time when he went to Miami, 55 times during his presidency. Can you believe that? The 2 commanders had ties to the space program in one manner or another. They were quite familiar with our space exploration, if not us going out, maybe them coming to us. So it all kinds of fits, and how Jackie Gleason, the great entertainer, could have been allowed to go in because Nixon says so, and that's it. The commander-in-chief says, I want this done, and he did it. No one's going to argue with you.
Yeah, nowadays, we've heard the stories of like Bill Clinton trying to get information when he was president and getting stonewalled, and now we see what's going on with like Tim Burchett in Congress getting stonewalled. We've heard the Jimmy Carter story of getting stonewalled, basically, or maybe given the truth and then was told too terrible for him to even say anything. Like I said, I think Nixon was one of the last presidents to have like the full-on knowledge. Maybe there have been others. Reagan, we'll get into tonight, and maybe some of the knowledge he had. It seemed to be very Republican-dominated 40s, 60s, 70s, because I think military contracts. Because the Republican Party had more financing and control and influence and power within that military-industrial complex.
That could be. Nixon had been around like forever. He was a congressman in the 40s, vice president under Eisenhower in the 50s, became president in January 69. And by 73, he had just gotten reelected in a landslide. He was the most popular president you would have thought ever. And it all came crashing down within about a year. But by February of 73, at the time of this event, he was riding way, way up in the polls, and he seemingly didn't have much of a care in the world.
But he had this thing called Watergate on the horizon that he did know, he was in some trouble.
Yeah, that they were talking about in Congress in February of 73, forming a committee to explore this and see what kind of criminal undertaking this was. And they eventually did do that. But at the time, Nixon thought he had the whole thing under control and that he could talk himself out of any sort of...
sure, if you can show your golf buddy aliens, you got the power.
Yeah. So in putting this book together, it was a lot like the Eisenhower case, as I point out, like a top 10 list of similarities. I've been told since my book came out on the Nixon case by a UFO investigator, I can't give his name, that he said, Paul, I have a lot of contacts, media, government, people overseas, and they tell me, he said, I asked them about this Nixon business. He says, Mr. Smith is exactly right. This did happen, that he wanted to form an agreement that superseded and went beyond what Eisenhower did back in 1954, his old boss, and that this is a very factual thing, that Nixon did have some contact of his own, and Jackie Gleason got to see a little sliver of it.
Yeah, I got, at the point I'm at the book, I just got past that point where you kind of get into what might have actually been going on that night with Nixon, we can get into. But you do point out how much Nixon was, besides being dirty tricks and stuff like that, that he was somebody who loved diplomacy. He loved, being a diplomat in a sense. He liked, forging treaties. I mean, only Nixon can go to China. Remember that?
Right.
That this would have been appealing to him to be the guy, to be making maybe interplanetary agreements.
Yeah, foreign policy was something that excited him, and he focused on it a lot. He liked
him and Henry Kissinger.
Yeah, with Kissinger, who just passed away. And as we were saying on the pregame show before this broadcast, Jackie Gleason was the star of the Honeymooners, and finally, one of the stars passed away just today.
Yes.
It was Trixie Norton on the show. And she was 99 years old.
99. Joyce Randolph.
Joyce Randolph. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun. We had. I remember we had. What's his name from the whole? We had the night that Charles Manson died. We had what was his name that we had on that was totally living like down the street from where the Manson murders happened and swear that I can't think of his name, but the night it happened, Charles Manson died. We always have these weird coincidences. Oh. The last cast member of the Honeymooners, Yeah. Jackie Gleason's such a fascinating guy. I would, if I had a time machine, that's a guy I would love to go hang with.
Oh yeah.
My God, I would love the guy.
And talented, but he was big time into the paranormal. And
right.
It was dangerous to do this for his career because people might have thought you were a nut back in the 50s and 60s and early 70s. It wasn't hip and mainstream like it is now. And Jackie had an enormous book collection, over 1,700 books and periodicals on the metaphysical, heavy on UFOs. He would call up UFO authors and interrogate them and call up UFO experiencers and ask them, I want every detail of what you saw. Can you imagine him doing that today? Oh, he'd love your show.
Right. I mean, he did. There was a radio show, in New York?
Right.
That
Abel's show, yeah.
Yeah. And that who covered UFOs for a brief time until they let him go. He didn't get to do that long. It's pre-Art Bell, But this is where things get interesting because I think one of the things people are like, why would Nixon do this for a golf buddy, and why Jackie Gleason? That's been I think some people's questions are skeptical of this story, and I think you lay out a very interesting case for a possibility.
Yeah.
Of why Nixon showed Jackie Gleason, if you want to lay that out somewhere.
Nixon's Watergate burglars have been caught, and they're going to trial and maybe going to jail. They need lawyers. They're expensive. They can't work anymore. They've got no money coming in, and they start blackmailing the president of the United States. Either you pay us our legal fees, like E. Howard Hunt, or we're going to have to let slip certain details. So Nixon's in a quandary. Where am I going to get hush money? He literally says this on the Watergate tapes in January of 73. This damn hush money, where are we going to come up with this? Shortly after Jackie Gleason is allowed to come to the air base, a few weeks later, Nixon is caught on tape, very calm about the hush money, raising money for the Watergate burglars and their lawyers. He says, oh, that's not a problem. I know where we can get that. We've got that available. So Nixon needed the money. Jackie was incredibly wealthy, and he spent money just really freely. He had supported Nixon for president and donated previously. The two shared a lawyer named Herb Kalmbach, who got pinched and went to jail for handing out bundles of cash to the Watergate burglars. So we can put.
Where'd he get the cash?
Yeah. Jackie had free money and Nixon needed it, and they shared a lawyer who was literally caught with handing out cash. So we can put two to two together here and come up with four.
Jackie could have paid him for legal fees for some, whatever, bull crap excuse, and gave the money to him, who funneled it out to they were Operation 40 members. These are people that people don't understand. The history is so, I love history, especially when it comes to government conspiracies, is that Howard Hunt and that crew of plumbers and the Watergate experience, or Operation 40, they were involved deeply in the whole Cuba, Bay of Pigs, and probably pulled in John F. Kennedy's assassination. Howard Hunt said so much, towards the end of his life on videotape confessions.
That's right.
He also, Howard Hunt, told somebody else, according to somebody else's story, and I can't think of the person's name, said the reason they killed Kennedy was because he was going to give up our deepest secret.
Yeah, Douglas Caddy was their attorney during Watergate, and he said he talked to E. Howard Hunt.
That's it.
Yeah, and Hunt told him Kennedy was going to start going public with our extraterrestrial contact and going into a program with the Soviet Union. Now, is that believable? I don't know, but it sure sounds plausible. But as you say, the Cubans on the Nixon burglary team had a lot of things to keep secret, and they could start blackmailing Nixon. You don't want this Operation 40 stuff that you used to command.
A lot of skeletons in the closet.
Yeah, so there's all the factors coming together that subtle or not so subtle extortion, we need money, and you've got to provide it for us. So Jackie was an easy mark, and possibly also Bob Hope, who was incredibly wealthy, wealthier than Gleason.
I just got to that part in the book.
Yeah, Bob Hope is at the golf tournament. Nixon calls him to make sure you're going to be there, right? We're going to get together on. Yeah,
you have I want to ask you this. So, how did you research this book? So you went and got all, did you go to Library of Congress and get records or requests, Freedom of Information Act? You have listed times, phone records, and logs, and what was also scrubbed. The blank spots are a bit of a mystery too. What was your research process?
Yeah, you got to read a lot of books, a lot of biographies. You have to go to Nixon's digitized files. They're on his presidential site, where it just happens by coincidence they removed a document from the very night in question, where you can't tell where he went. After 8:30 at night, he shows up at the next morning. They're not going to tell you who was on that helicopter flight. Even in the afternoon, when Nixon flew to Jackie Gleason's golf tournament that Monday afternoon and spoke to the press with Jackie right by his side, showing that they were together, they were pals, and they've got something cooking. And so, one hand washes the other in politics. It's around 8:30 at night that Nixon's records stop, and where we think Jackie Gleason was picked up by helicopter that landed earlier in the day right behind his house. The president himself at a chopper pad on this golf course where Jackie's having a celebrity pro-am on CBS television. So everything fits together quite plausibly for what Beverly Gleason, his then wife, came forward and said in 3 different interviews.
In the first interview she released, the first time this story was published, She was married to Jackie Gleason. They hadn't been divorced yet, right?
Right. And he blew up. Said she got on the phone and said, "You're not to talk about this. This didn't happen as far as you're concerned." And, well, it was too late. She'd already talked about it.
So he sold it.
You're like a tabloid. And he blew up, and she said that was the end of our marriage, that they were separated. She was hoping for reconciliation. Instead, her blabbing some of the information on that night he went with President Nixon to an Air Force base, that ruined their marriage. So she came along about 8 or 9 years later in 1983 and wrote an entire article on it. And
she was going to do a memoir. She was going to do a memoir.
Yeah, right. And that blew Jackie up again. Got on the phone, chewed her out. You're not to talk about this. And I think she did that mostly for the money. She wanted to either write a book for the money or get Jackie's a better divorce settlement. And around 2000, she gave another interview, never changed her story, never retracted it, said this really happened, and gave a few more details, said that Nixon was there that night and showed Jackie, and he told me everything, she said, as soon as he got home, pale as a ghost.
My imagination just pictures that. When I'm reading your book, I just imagine Jackie Gleason coming through the door, looking white as the sheet, and pulling out his famously chain-smoking pack of cigarettes. He's just probably puffing away with a glass of some kind of alcohol of some kind. I don't know. I forgot what he drank. Sitting there just looking like his mind is completely been blown.
Yeah, I recently finished a movie screenplay, and that's the opening scene. Jackie
that's the best opening scene ever.
Yeah. He comes in like, "What happened to you? Where have you been?" That's what his wife records that she asked him. And he was like slumped in a chair in their living room around midnight, she said. And he says, "I've just seen the bodies of extraterrestrials. The president of the United States showed them to me." And she's not sure if he's serious. And he goes into some detail. And she said, "He sure looked like he was serious to me." And he didn't retract the story. A number of showbiz people and a number of UFO investigators asked him, "Is this story true?" And he refused comment. He could have easily dismissed it.
Just said all that. Right, she's crazy.
Yeah, this is nonsense. This never happened. But Jackie did not. That gives you more credence to the story that she was telling what happened, that he came home flabbergasted. And, Jackie was so into UFOs and ETs and such in his book reading and his own research that something really shook him up to be that pale and trembling and started drinking and smoking and such. So I believe Beverly's story, what Jackie told her, and I kind of wonder if Jackie told her everything, that there was more going on that caused him to be so pale and shook up.
I don't think he told her anything more than she told us. I think at this point she would have told us anything else. She added in the last details of Nixon being there. And I think that just got lost in the translations of her earlier telling of the story. I mean, maybe it's just waiting for Nixon to have passed on before she added that caveat to the story, too. Gleason died before Nixon. So that, the people be like, why would Jackie Gleason... I actually watched recently some of his last interviews, like with 60 Minutes, a couple years before he died. Yeah. And I was looking at his face, like, is this the face of a man that's like, man, I want to tell you. Imagine having the ultimate, that there's no question to be the ultimate secret, the ultimate knowledge of this, that he knows. I mean, being in Hollywood and being in that echelon of elite people, and it's just, let's face it, that's what they are to us. We put them up on these stupid pedestals, but they're in that world and they know a lot of secrets about everybody that are never put to the public.
To be a liar, to tell tall tales, to hold stuff. He was serious. He wanted the facts in everything, and he would get on the phone and start researching himself. So that's another factor. If he had been a liar, made up all kinds of nonsense and wrecked his own reputation, you couldn't believe the story. But Jackie was just the opposite. He wanted the facts in everything.
Speaking of facts, I remember the first time we ever talked about this, you corrected me when I talked about this story about, because I had always seen like the television remakes, dramatizations, and documentaries or TV shows of this incident, and they show Nixon pulling up in a car and driving him away, and that's one myth about it. That what do you say that it would have been like a 50-minute drive to the air base or longer?
It would have been Nixon escaping 2 different security checkpoints, and all his security guards driving a car, which he was lousy at night. 40 miles across Key Biscayne to Miami to Jackie's house, which was a gated community, and then driving about 50 miles south to Homestead Air Force Base. That never happened. That's just fantasy. Somebody made that up.
And I don't, it doesn't fit with the personalities we're dealing with here.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to show up and show your buddy, aliens, you're not showing up in some car. You're showing up with, the presidential helicopter.
Yeah, send the chopper over and pick you up, and it takes about 15 minutes at the most to fly you from the chopper pad at Inverary Golf Course, where Jackie had his house, to take you straight to Homestead Air Force Base, where they, of course, landed helicopters all the time. Nixon was in and out of Homestead by helicopter after he would get off Air Force One 55 times in his presidency. So it fits very easily that they could have pulled this off at night in helicopters, but not by car.
And the other thing is that we're talking Cold War times. Russia is heavily spying on us. They had people in Biscayne, Florida, people near Homestead Air Force Base. They had, and so did our government, Secret Service, and everybody else knew that they were being watched. They wouldn't let Nixon drive in a car by himself to go pick up Gleason. It would not happen. The one thing about the caveat of that is that people say that Gleason had a big fear of flying.
That's true. All he had to do was get in and shut his eyes for 15 minutes. But
hey, buddy, can you get over this fear for 15 minutes to see aliens? I think he could.
Especially if the president himself showed up in the helicopter. I don't think he did. I think he sent his pilot with a helicopter, probably not even Marine One. And Jackie said, sure, I'll go. The president, sure, I'll do whatever he wants me to do. But I think this was set up somewhat in advance, and Jackie knew at least something was up, that he was going to see something unusual.
Well, like you said, it was like almost they were doing a test run that day at the golf course for the tournament, because they landed Nixon on the golf course there. Like that was like a test run for that night.
Yeah, the pilot had the coordinates and how to land, how to take off at the exact right site. And all Jackie had to do was get a phone call, walk out of his house right across like the 18th green, I think it was. And there he is, ready to take a chopper ride. And so while it's true that he didn't like to fly in airplanes, maybe he wasn't
again,
scared of helicopter.
Dude, can you get over your 15 minutes of height, scared of heights and flying? Can you get over it for 15 minutes to see real aliens? Yes, you can. Yeah, I'm sure he could. The man had a whole library full of books. I'd be interested, man. I would love to just go through that whole library of his.
Yeah.
What if he left a clue in there? It's hard for me to imagine that he didn't leave something to say. I understand they lived by this code of secrecy. He was a Mason, a Freemason. You talk about in the book that these guys know how to take secrets to the grave, secret orders and all. But I swear you talk about in the book that there were some witnesses or tell a story about after this encounter, Gleason barely eating and then like being jubilant at times, and then at other times like berating his wife about how can they keep the secret.
Right. Part of his believability, or the story's believability, is that Jackie would go from the highs to the lows in his mood swings in the hours and days. This affected him for days. I can't believe the government is hiding all of this. They could come out and tell everybody. They've got the evidence. I've seen it. And then like minutes later, he'd be so giddy like a schoolboy. Me, above all other American civilians, I got to see the hard proof. The president showed it to me. And, Jackie was practically an orphan when he was a little boy, growing up just his mother and him.
Very poor, yeah.
He had almost no money. He was just like as poor as can be. No dad. And to rise up to this height where you're trusted by the American president to go see the evidence that we're being visited, that had to have just made him giddy as can be.
There was other people there at that tournament I found interesting in the book. I didn't know about Gordon Cooper.
Right. He was also a high-ranking Freemason and a friend of Jackie, and probably they coordinated all the time on UFO stories. And Gordon
Oh
Cooper
yeah, you had to imagine. I mean, come on, Gordon Cooper, as he after he retired, started talking, and I mean, besides his own personal encounters as an astronaut that he had, there's the one that always interests me is the one where he was on when he was in the military, and he was on a base, and it was footage that they had recorded from a left-alone camera of a craft landing and beings getting out and getting back in, and then him handing it off. I've seen him tell that story in an interview once, but it's hard to find. There's not a lot on that, but I've always found that Gordon Cooper story that he told very fascinating.
He wasn't there at the time, but he had a camera crew at Edwards Air Force Base, of all places, that was recording something, and this spacecraft came down and landed on its tripods, this little disc, and they turned the cameras on them naturally and recorded all this. Gordon Cooper was allowed to view the video, of course, because he's in charge of this project, that they weren't doing anything on aliens intentionally. No. It was on jet planes and such. So he got to look at that and said, well, what do we do with this? They sent it to the Pentagon, and that's it. It disappeared. They never heard back from it. So,
there it is. There you go, Congressman Tim Burchett, all those people. You know, that was given. That should be congressional preview. That should be within a military record somewhere, right? That video, that footage that Gordon Cooper talked about, it's somewhere. You know. Locked in some warehouse with the Ark of the Covenant or something.
Of all people, Gordon Cooper gave Richard Nixon a tour of the Houston Space Center during the '68 campaign. And so they were quite friendly with each other. And they're all at the golf tournament there that Monday. You got to believe that if anyone was allowed to go along or was present, it was a national hero that Gordon Cooper was a famous astronaut who said he saw UFOs while flying Air Force jets in Germany, and that he saw something very strange, it sounded like a UFO, on a mission like Mercury 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
Like in 65, I think
something
it was.
Approached his craft, if I remember right.
He talked about that. And then he talked about, as I put in my book, there's this audio recording of him talking about being taken to a landing site, like a fresh site, with indentations in the soil, and they took samples, and they were told a craft came down here in Florida. And so there was some real wild stuff going on. We may have only scratched the surface, but so many people are passed on, were afraid to talk. God bless him, Gordon Cooper was pretty bold and even spoke at the United Nations about some of his experiences and issued a statement here and there. So he did what he could.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we've talked about it on the show with you and other guests, you know, about like the Apollo missions and those astronauts, like especially Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong and Michael Collins, the classic conference after they went to the moon, the press conference where they're all very sullen. Like, what did they say? I'm one of those believers. Like, there's people that, you know, I've had guests on that don't believe we went to the moon. I believe we went to the moon. I believe we went there, and we saw a lot more than we expected. But I think they knew we would, and these poor astronauts were just told to shut up. Sign NDAs.
Yeah, they left a special Masonic object, like a plaque or something. And they also, the astronauts, left a plaque inscribed by Richard Nixon on the moon. Apparently, it's still there to this day. So, like I say, Freemasons are good guys. My grandfather was a Freemason.
My great-grandfather was.
Secret handshakes, secret language, secret rituals. They do things in secret. And so to keep this knowledge between, like, Gordon Cooper, very advanced, probably 32nd degree Mason, and Jackie Gleason, who was all about, remember on the Honeymooners, he made us put
shiners.
The raccoon, the grand exalted poobah, the raccoon. It was the parody of the Freemasons.
Yeah.
So, and there was also the spaceship episode, or the extraterrestrial.
Freemasons have let me. I've as a paranormal investigator investigated a Freemasonic lodge. They let us in. You know, we're not Masons, but they let us in there. It's not so secret as everybody thinks, but it is a group that many powerful people belong to, and you can be used as a tool to move secret information or agreements and stuff that's beyond the public eye. Any secret institution, any intelligence agencies like ours, anything can be used for good or bad. You know, that's what it is. It's not that Freemasonry is bad. It's just that there are people within it that have used it and its connections.
There might have been a few that went bad and used the secrecy to cover it up, but overall, these are good men who contribute to your local community, and they pay for like a playground or a hospital, or they show up and paint a building or something simple or something financial. I don't have any negative things to say about the Freemasons. Like I say, my grandfather was one, making me eligible to join someday if I wish. But their numbers are dwindling. Their influence is dwindling.
When I was doing the investigation, they were trying to get us to sign, be interested to sign, and I almost did. It was interesting. I had some, I've done research on the Freemasons. My great grandfather was. My wife's grandfather was high up in Freemasonry. 32nd degree Freemason, if I remember right. So I mean. I don't think they're bad people, but there's a lot of history to that. You can get back to the times when people thought, the Freemason conspiracy goes back to the early 1900s, 1800s, and but a lot of this country wouldn't be founded without Freemasonry. Yeah. Like I said, it can be used for good or bad, and it depends on the people within, but it's not that they're bad, that the institution's bad.
Well, so obsessed with mystical secrets and the paranormal that Jackie would join and want to know everything that the Masons would know. Plus, Jackie was a natural, tender-hearted man. He was a very kind and generous man most of the time. People came forward with stories long after his death of his incredible generosity. And yet he kind of stiffed his first wife and children and didn't pay them very much, alimony and child support. And one of them just passed away, one of his grandchildren the other day, the brother of Jason Patrick, the famous actor. They were talking about Jackie's son-in-law gave an interview once and said, we had to eat hot dogs for Thanksgiving. Jackie would hand out $100 to a doorman, but he couldn't hand out much money to his first wife and kids.
And that was the thing with Beverly, too. I mean, she was in his living in his mansion.
He didn't want to give her.
But he wasn't living there. He was living with his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
He was staying, and then so that's one of the reasons I think that she might have given this story out was to get his attention to come to move back home, which he did for a month or whatever, and then they got divorced, right?
Yeah. And we haven't even gotten to Jackie's most amazing home at all. The
UFO house.
Oh, yeah, the UFO house. That was astounding. How that was kind of kept a secret from the public for so long. It did appear in modern mechanics or popular mechanics around 1960 or so. And what I've read is that one of Gleason's guests, his first guest, was Richard Nixon, who was vice president at the time when it was all finished. So here he's got Tesla scopes, Tesla coils. He's got these big bay windows, and he wanted the whole thing to feel like they're in outer space, set near the side of a bluff. And there were telescopes for viewing the sky. And Jackie kept a ham radio collection.
He was a ham radio guy.
Yeah. He collected almost
him and Art Bell would have got along well.
His stepson said that we had a special room in his house. He had almost 30 of these darn things. Jackie would go overboard, anything to find out about what's going on in the skies.
Man, that's somebody Art Bell would have totally got along with if he ever had gotten a chance to interview him. 2 ham radio operators, aliens and paranormal. Oh my God, those two talking. That would have been. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Art Bell was on the radio in the 80s, but he hadn't really taken off on the paranormal thing, so it wasn't well known. But man, it would have been awesome to hear those two talk about this stuff. You talk about the Tesla coil in ham radio, as that you point out in the book that maybe Jackie was interested in the mythology or rumors or whatever, and it really isn't, because Tesla came out of his own mouth that he talked to aliens through his radio technology.
Yeah. This was one of the reasons why he invented this darn stuff in the late 1890s in Colorado. There's the house. Jackie got possession of his Tesla coils, or at least remakes or models of them. And gosh knows what Jackie was doing with these things. So I inserted a scene of that nature into my screenplay, and my agent's going to try to take it to possibly a streaming service or a production company.
Man, dude, that'd be an awesome movie.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, yeah.
Well, if we can make use of AI and have Jackie's real face and his real voice,
Yeah, you're not going to get that.
Yeah. Well, his estate would manage that and control that. If they received a little money, maybe they would.
They won't. I don't think they'll give it to you.
Well,
that'd be awesome.
Also, Nixon, I don't think his family is going to let.
No.
However, there is such a thing as public domain. You're a public figure. You can kind of say whatever you want about someone in the press and in a book. I try to go with facts only. I don't like making up stuff or wild, far out conspiracy theories. I know that I try to double check and recheck and use sources and try to be sure of what I project. And then at times I do make clear in my books, this next part is a little speculative. I try to use some logical conjecture here, but I try to stick to just the facts, man.
Just the facts, man. But I'm the guy that tries to fill in the gaps. I'm the one that's going to speculate because it fascinates me. My little imagination goes wild with this, this whole thing and there's so many connections. Like, I mean, just this one day, February 19th, 1973. Everything that happened. There's so much connected to your other books and the other. When you get into the Eisenhower thing and Eisenhower's connect. Wasn't it? You said Nixon and Gleason went and visited Eisenhower's wife, his widow.
Nixon went with B.B. Rebozo.
Oh, that was he went with B.B. He went with Nixon's his right hand man. That's right.
Yeah, Rebozo drove him from Camp David to visit Mamie Eisenhower and talk about something in private, and then they drove back to Camp David. Nixon didn't do any driving. He always sat in the passenger seat because his mind is just, he's got a lot on his plate. We know Nixon maybe have been a little unstable at times, especially as Watergate unraveled and his presidency unraveled. But we've got to cut him some slack. The Cold War, the Vietnam War, with the oil embargo sending up the price of oil and everything in this country with inflation, he had to deal with a ton of stuff, and he wasn't getting much help from anybody. So,
and then to have knowledge of secret government programs like aliens would be a big weight to carry.
Yeah, and so he had a lot of plates to juggle or balls to keep up in the air. And the Chinese, he had to play them off against the Russians and try to wrap up the Vietnam War honorably. And it was just super tough for him.
He was left with quite a mess.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he kind of made a mess. The Vietnam War ended messy just after he left office. And the Watergate scandal exploded and just ruined his reputation, frankly. To this day, Nixon is considered, I am not a crook. Well, it turns out I'm not a crook. And kind of a jolly, comical figure that you would see in Futurama. They made him president of Earth in a jar.
It's some of the best of Futurama, I have to say, is the Nixon
it is. Funny, yeah.
Oh, especially with Hubert Humphrey. Isn't it Hubert Humphrey he has his headless? Agnew. It's Agnew. It's Agnew. Headless body of Agnew.
I like the one scene where Nixon says, "Nixon is always about class. Now let's cut this turd loose."
Oh yeah, but it's like he was a real person that had faults and failures, obviously, and a lot of weight and pressure on his shoulder, and he had to been extremely paranoid. Yeah. I just can't imagine carrying all those different secrets, and not just talk about aliens. He had mafia connections. Yeah. There was dirty crap going on. There's there's the classic case where Nixon revealed to somebody that he was in fear that some people like Goldwater and them knew who killed JFK. He overheard their conversation.
Walter Cronkite gave an interview and said, I was invited to a White House dinner and the big White House dining hall, and there's Nixon, and Nixon is staring up at the border at the top of the wall, and he's staring at it all the way around the room like he sees bugs or ghosts or something. Cronkite couldn't believe Nixon's behavior at a big dinner like that, and that kind of shows that he was starting to unravel. Well, and he did take a little medication under a psychiatrist or something close to that, an analyst's care to stay on an even keel, and he probably drank a little too much on top of that. Again, he was under enormous pressure.
Right. I mean, I've heard the stories of, I don't, of course, these are legends, but of Nixon walking through the halls of the White House, looking at the presidential paintings and talking to them, like,
Sure.
get me, how do I get out of this?
Why me, you see.
What did I do?
Shirley MacLaine, the actress, said she
Oh,
got to talk to a White House butler who told her, one day I walked into a room and Nixon is sitting in a chair drinking from a bottle of liquor and he was buck naked. So, yeah. So,
I haven't heard that one.
Nixon
God, I wanted Shirley MacLaine to come on the show. I had somebody on that runs her website and is friends with her. I'm like, please give me Shirley MacLaine. I'd love to talk to her. She has so much interesting stories.
She sure does, yeah.
Oh, she's totally into this stuff, like Gleason was, And now she's in if Gleason could be alive today. You know what I'm saying? Like, he would have told or what he could tell, Because, right, he came from a time where you don't talk. I mean, there's people that didn't talk about Roswell crash because the government told them they couldn't talk for decades.
Threaten them.
Because if your government told you not to talk, you didn't.
Jackie would call in occasionally because he was an insomniac, the Long John Nebel radio show in New York City where he lived. And I think even once stopped by the studio as a guest to talk about what else? UFOs. And so I've heard some of the recordings. The audio is terrible, but you can make out Jackie's voice. And at one point he tells the host, Long John Nebel, I was talking to Edward R. Murrow, and I told Murrow UFOs are the most important subject in the whole world, and you can hear him on this audio tape.
I've been trying to. Can you send me the audio? Is there links to that on YouTube? I was trying to find that audio from those interviews.
There used to be. I don't know if they still are.
I cannot find them.
Or you can look.
I was looking for them. I was looking for it because I've heard of this, and I think I've heard a little bit segment on something else where they played. But I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear Jackie Gleason talking about UFOs.
Yeah,
because I watch all those other interviews. He doesn't mention a damn word about UFOs, and they're not asking either.
I've got a Facebook page. I put on the link to that interview where Jackie says UFOs are the most important.
All right, I got to find that. Yeah.
So that'll be the Nixon and Eisenhower UFO encounter Facebook page.
I'm gonna have to look that up because I want to hear that. I love history, and especially UFOlogy history. And like I said, this is one of the greatest stories out there of it. And in my personal opinion, I think it really happened. I feel like it happened. Like I can feel it in my bones when I read your book and over the years thinking about it. I mean, a lot of people, I can see why they're skeptical. Why would a president risk this or do this and show Gleason? I think, like I said, this book, you make out a pretty good case of why. With Watergate and the hush money, that Gleason offered $1 million on that radio program. Was it that radio program? He offered $1 million to anybody who could prove to him.
Yeah,
I can just imagine Nixon like, you still got that $1 million, Jackie?
When Jackie would make $14 million a year, and he was obsessed with this subject, you can see him say, well, I'll take $1 million and give it to you if you can show me the hard proof. And I think Nixon took him up on it. Literally. Yeah. He needed the money, and Jackie was offering it. So,
and then I got to hear that. I want to hear the Nixon tape where he's like, I think I know where we can get some money in Florida.
He didn't say the word Gleason or that they took that part out. Yeah, Jackie gave me a ton of stuff. But we really should tell your audience, what exactly did Jackie say he saw? I don't want to ruin it so that you don't go buy the book, but we really should mention that.
Because this is a whole other subject to get into.
Yeah, Beverly said what Jackie saw, he confessed to this, were 4 individual alien bodies stretched out on 4 separate examining tables in a kind of lab on the far side of Homestead Air Force Base. Now, before we all go running down there and demand to ask, can we get in? Can we see this lab? The whole base got flattened by a hurricane in the 1990s, I think it was. Really squashed, and they had to bulldoze what was left, and it's been repurposed as a different kind of air base to this day. So the proof, if it wasn't scuttled out of there before the hurricane came, could have gotten just crushed or pulled out to sea or something.
And it was also like at installation, it was like on the back end of the base, basically, right? Or it was like, kind of hidden.
Told his wife that they were taken by a military escort, the president with him, across the base to this remote laboratory.
Driven there. They were driven in the base.
Yeah. A lab within the base, but at the far end of the base. And there's an armed guard at the door, so that, this is serious business. You don't have an armed guard at the door for nothing to guard a bunch of rabbits or cabbages or whatever you've got inside. So once they went in, I don't think Nixon told him a whole lot, but he said, here it is. And that Jackie was allowed to go up and look at the bodies. I don't think in any way Nixon was playing a hoax. He was not a fun jokester kind of guy, like fooled you,
dirty tricks.
Tricky
Nixon, gotcha.
Nixon was
Tricky
somewhat humorless, and so he didn't play pranks on people like that. So I think the bodies were real. They were probably, as I put in my book, imported from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Hangar 15 or Hangar 18, whatever it was.
And it's very, very interesting that the daughter of the guy who ran the Air Force Base Homestead in 73, she now works at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in some sensitive position there, where they're supposedly, to this day,
daughter of a general.
Yeah, reverse engineering, inspecting bodies, the Blue Lab, and all that stuff.
I've said this. I always loved the TV miniseries that Steven Spielberg did called Taken, and in that, it's kept secret because it's handed down within a family. There's one general hands it down to his son, who hands it down to his daughter, and I've said that one of the ways this could have been kept secret in our military, besides it being handed out to these military-industrial complex private companies like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and all that, is that it is also passed down to the family members with the original people involved in the military. Who better to keep it secret than your own family?
Yeah, that's true. Steven Spielberg used real UFO cases from Dr. Jacques Vallée and Dr. J. Allen Hynek. And you had a commercial earlier in the broadcast for this new movie from 78, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which takes place at an Air Force base out west with Air Force officials greeting incoming aliens who were small and friendly and everything. It had everything there except Eisenhower and Nixon. J. Allen Hynek gave an interview and said, I'm quite aware of the Eisenhower encounter. We're looking into that story. I'd love to see what his files said eventually. So it's easy to put together that Hynek told Spielberg, and this is where he got the idea for this movie. And so if the Nixon encounter that happened like 5 years before this was a part of that, it's almost a miracle that Spielberg got to make
this. Now you got Jack Vallée coming out and saying he has been working with basically secret military programs.
It certainly could be. Spielberg used his real-life case file to make it as authentic as possible. So I think Spielberg knows more than he does, and he gives very brief interviews.
Well, he's got a definite interest in it. Yeah. He's done several things, including with aliens. He's definitely got an interest. I tell anyone it's very not well-known miniseries, but it was called Taken. I have it on box set. But if you can find it to watch it, I highly recommend it. I'm not telling you like Spielberg's giving you facts, but like he says, I think Spielberg throws in things that he's heard or known into his fiction. And Taken is a really interesting miniseries on this subject. I think it was my favorite of his.
I hope that you don't find a copy of my Mo 41 book, because I've got it all set, all remodeled, and added new stories and new information. It was going to be published as a hardback, my first ever hardback. And then my publisher died. His son folded the company.
Oh, no.
The book's not coming out anytime soon. But in it, I talk about, from my hometown of Cape Girardeau, just outside the city, not far from the airport, and just north of a town called Chaffee, Missouri, there was a UFO crash in 1941. Well, who used to fly in and out of Chaffee, Missouri, but Kate Capshaw, who was a former resident and had a daughter living there by her ex-husband. So Spielberg and Capshaw were flying into the Cape Airport, not far from this crash site. Whether they ever knew this or not, I don't know. But they would go to Chaffee and pick up, I forget her name now, but she's also an actress, a famous actress. She was in like L.A. Law or something.
Yeah.
NCIS or Jessica Capshaw, that's her name. She grew up in Chaffee, Missouri, just south of where I lived. I have been through Chaffee many, many a time. And so what Spielberg knew about that story as well, I don't know. And I started to put a lot of this together. Of all the people in the whole world, Harry Truman was out in that area 5 months before the UFO crash. He was in Cape Girardeau in November of 1941, inspecting the airport to see if we were going to get funds to expand it and turn it into a regional airport. And it was not far from the crash site. And so Harry was a high-ranking Freemason. I don't know if Spielberg is, but there's just all kinds of ties going on. And you just wish that somebody would break these bonds, burst the dam open with some revelations, leak a file on purpose.
I don't know about you, but I've been watching. As much as I have my skepticism about it, I do honestly think people like Tim Burchett, Representative Tim Burchett, Luna, I think is the other really young congressman that's been involved in this. I think they're really trying. I don't think and I think David Gersh, is all the criticism that he's received. I honestly think he's doing what he's allowed to do, as much as he's allowed to do.
Yeah, I'm disappointed that Gersh has not seen these items in person. He doesn't make that claim. He says, I've talked to so many people that I believe it, but he hasn't got a report copy or any film footage. And
but he did.
Proof.
He did just recently, as we talked about last week, say he has been allowed to say he does have firsthand knowledge of alien craft.
Oh, well, I did not catch that.
Yeah,
so he's saying in a roundabout
way.
But
he said he was allowed now. He's allowed now. That means what he's getting are people in the Pentagon saying, yeah, okay, David, now you can go ahead and say this, or you can do that. And that's not a criticism of David Gersh. This is how these things work. I think there are people within our Pentagon, and this is why there are whistleblowers that know they don't have this technology. I was talking about the 2004 thing that came on Redacted today about this guy talking about a whistleblower saying that the JSOC and Lockheed Martin special operations, hired gunmen, got in a firefight. Obviously this has gotten out of control. After 80 years, it's completely out of control, and that's what Tim Burchett's words were coming out of the skiff. Is that they have been, they keep getting, basically railroaded off of this thing, and that it's all out of control. That these things are all within private contractors' hands, and God knows what they're doing with it.
I'd like to know all three of your opinions. Are we in the process of a gradual disclosure? Is this the way they're going to leak it, bit by bit, year by year? Do you think this is deliberate, or is this just a hodgepodge by accident?
We'll have to get to that opinion when we come back from this short commercial break, because we got to go to commercial break on that, and we'll talk about that. And I'll get Jamie and Rob's opinion. I got mine, and we'll see where you land on that too, Paul. And you guys can call and share your opinion on that as well, because when we come back from this short commercial break, I will open up the phone lines. Call us, tell us what you think this UFO disclosure is. Is it an actual disclosure, small little bits at a time, or is it just a scam? Is it Project Bluebeam? They're just going to fake aliens landing. New World Order. I don't know. When we come back from the short commercial break, you can join this conversation. I will open up the phone lines, call on the show, talk to our guest, Paul Blake Smith, the author of the Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter, when we come back from the short commercial break.
Into the combined effects of sensory deprivation and hallucinatory drugs. The subject of the experiment is himself, and the experiment is out of control. Ken Russell's Altered States, a film that must not be missed, is in the West End now. Altered States, Certificate X.
Do you wish for more paranormal and spiritual content? The Paranormal Chronicles magazine is a free digital magazine crammed with the very best in paranormal and spiritual articles and features. No sign-up, no subscription, just free reading and knowledge for you. Read today at www.paranormalchronicles.com/magazine.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday at the live stream with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Paranation Magazine is a new paranormal magazine based out of Denver, Colorado. Our goal isn't just to give you the best paranormal content out there, but to promote paranormal unity. We're doing this by giving everyone an opportunity to tell their stories and to share their experiences. For more information, follow us on Facebook at Paranation Magazine and soon, paranationmag.com.
I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like is the extraordinary travels of a young, alone, and broke psychic in the highly anticipated new book from internationally renowned psychic, medium, medical intuitive, and best-selling author Sherry Dillard. Critics have described I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like as an engrossing memoir, an empowering story of how a broken girl came to accept her psychic gift, a refreshing and fun read. I've Never Met a Dead Person I Didn't Like is available through Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, and wherever books are sold.
Wrote Spirits of the Dead with a pen dipped in warm blood. You will see the ultimate in terror with this important all-star cast. Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda in Edgar Allan Poe's Spirits of the Dead. Only Poe's demented genius could bring to the screen such horror and evil. Spirits of the Dead stars Brigitte Bardot, Alain Delon, Jane Fonda, Terence Stamp, and Peter Fonda. Directed by three masters of the cinema, Federico Fellini, Louis Malle, and Roger Vadim. Spirits of the Dead is an adventure in terror beyond your wildest nightmares. Spirits of the Dead in color is rated R.
Please, Spock, do me a favor. And don't say it's fascinating. No. But it is interesting.
You're listening to Paranormal Soup, bringing you the weird every Sunday night. Call into the show and join the discussion. The call-in lines are 219-230-4444 or 260-225-9419 or by Skype caller ID oojblandoo or jbland Paranormal Soup. And now to your host, Jason Bland.
Our guest tonight is Paul Blake Smith. He is the author of the Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter. I am truly enjoying this book. We've had him on to talk about the MO-41, the Missouri 1941 Cape Girardeau crash, and then the Eisenhower alien, or Eisenhower's Close Encounter, or Encounter, what is it? President Eisenhower's Close Encounters is the other book I got here on hard copy. I've been looking forward to this interview all week because I enjoy this subject, probably up there with top 3 subjects to talk about is aliens, of course, and the history, ufology and history, and these what happened back in those 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I think this was still in our government hands, and we'll get into that. Rob had to leave. We won't get his opinion tonight on what's going on with the disclosure thing, but I got my opinions on it, as you've heard, and Jamie does too, and we'll get Paul's, and we can get yours. If you want to call in, join this conversation. I actually, you heard the phone lines. If you can do me a favor tonight, somebody try to call in on the 260-225-9419. line tonight because I need to test that line out because Google's threatening to take it away from me because I don't use it enough. So call in. I need to use it. 260-225-9419. And if you can't get on that phone number, the other lines or 2 Skype IDs, call in on those. But let's go ahead and get back to our guest. All right, we were talking before the break about what our opinion is of the disclosure. I will let Jamie, you ready to go on that first? I'd love to hear Jamie's thoughts.
Well, you know me, I don't trust the government much on anything.
Really? No.
For real. That they put out there. And I feel anything that they're putting out there is for a reason. Usually to benefit them or some sort of a narrative that they're putting out there. We're on a need-to-know basis. So are they wanting to perhaps desensitize us, get us slowly used to this for some reason? Are they setting us up for something further down the line, like a Project Bluebeam, so that we have to fear the enemy, the person driving the craft, and it's us putting our faith into the government, and it all goes into that whole one world government scenario. I don't think they're going to tell us anything we don't already know. And I don't have much faith in it. I'm just kind of waiting to see what their end game is with it. There's got to be some sort of a reason why they're deciding to do this and why they're doing it now.
Well, that's the difference, though, nowadays, is none of us believe our government anymore when they're trying to tell us. Because, I mean, if you had these, if Eisenhower gave his famous speech and included, they have aliens and kept it from it, then everybody would have believed Eisenhower. If they had congressional hearings back about it in the 50s or 60s or 70s or 80s, where they really were like they're doing now, people would be really up in arms and the world in chaos and the cats and dogs are raining from the sky. Oh, my God. But wow, how times changed. How things are different now. My opinion on this, and I've said it on the show, several reasons I think we're getting this is that I think, like I said, there are people in the Pentagon, there are people in the military, there are good, honest people that have come encountered with this information and want to know why isn't it that we don't have direct control over it anymore, that this is all handed out to private contractors. We also have China, India, Japan, Mexico, us, and others going back to the moon. And you know me and my fascination with the moon. I think the real key is once we all start getting really back on the moon, that who's going to keep their, one of these countries might not keep their mouth shut about what's there if they start really looking at what's on the moon. And then the cat's really out of the bag. But I think there's always been a fight within the intelligence community with politicians, congressmen, and people involved in the military-industrial complex. There's information's power. Like I said, about the Clintons, when Bill Clinton was in office, he tried looking into it. And I've always said I think the Clintons were information brokers. Don't want to get political, but I think they're traitors. I think they sold secrets. And what bigger secret or information is there than alien technology? I think some of this, Podesta was involved in some of their early trying to get some of the early disclosures out, and he's a big part of the Clinton Foundation. And I think by pushing it out there in the forum, gives other people opportunity to get down to the secret that might be for nefarious purposes to sell information. But it also, I think, is because there are honest people within our government. There are honest people that want to see these private contractors not have the control. And like I just said from that story I just heard today from Redacted, if they're getting into actual combative fights with people from, Lockheed Martin has their own military. Obviously, if this happened, they have their own little hired mercenaries that shot 2 military JSOC, killed them. That's pretty serious business when you're, these private contractors and military, have their own little private militaries, recovery groups, and are not sharing. We gave them the supposed story is that we gave them alien technology to reverse engineer. And in this story, particularly, Lockheed Martin supposedly did not. They gave back the materials, so they couldn't figure it out, but then developed a craft and did not tell our U.S. government and kept it secret. There's a lot of concerning things in that story alone. What concerns me, and I think, is that there are people that are trying to get this information out there to force the hands of these private contractors to give up the information they've been hiding from even our military. That's my opinion. Now, Paul.
Yeah, if you are correct in that Gersh was recently given the green light to reveal a little more permission, that could be a sign of drip, 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 gradual disclosure that psychologically they're kind of easing us into this.
Right.
However, remember when he first came out with all this information, like testified on television and everything, they just happened to leak information that he suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, and kind of tried to trash his mental health and his reputation. So that seemed like
well, that's the thing. There's forces with it's like so there's forces within the Pentagon and the DoD that he's working with that are saying, I want you to get this information out here. We're going to put you in contact with people that have that are part of these programs that want to get this information out, but they're scared. And he's kind of the representative for this and putting himself on the line for this, but he has to follow procedures and he still answers to them. But then there's other people, I think, within the intelligence community, especially in the CIA. I mean, they're literally a revolving door in the CIA for people that work there as an analyst and doing their thing, that are helping ensure their buddies at Boeing, Lockheed, Raytheon get their military contracts. And when they leave the CIA, guess where they go work for? Boeing, Lockheed, Raytheon. It's a revolving door, and they don't work for us. They don't work for the U.S. government or American interests. They work for these private military contractors. That's who they work for, and that's who they really answer to. And they're the people I really think would be pushing back on this, because they don't want their buddies at Lockheed, Raytheon, or any of these other companies to answer or give up this information. I mean, what if they could get to the nut of this, is that we gave alien technology at some point to Lockheed or to Raytheon, then that could cause saying, well, we gave you the original tech, where have you gone with it? That's its own snowball that could roll down the hill for them. And I think that's where they want to keep it away from.
Supposedly, I've read that Nixon didn't want the government in too much of this majestic group, that he folded it in his first year in office, and he wanted everything privatized, put it at Lockheed.
We can blame Nixon.
Yeah. And so he hated big government, and he wanted everything in the hands of private corporations, and that he did so getting the ball rolling to where we are today. So if that's true, Nixon was an influential factor.
And didn't take the advice of his mentor.
Yeah,
his predecessor.
Warned of the military-industrial complex giving them too much private power and their secrecy and everything. So you could speak very eloquently to that Eisenhower literally tried to tell us about this stuff, and that Nixon spoke a little of it too. But once he resigned in scandal, he wrote some books and tried to save his reputation and build himself up. And he just wouldn't talk about UFOs. According to one biographer, I asked him, what is this about UFOs? And he only raised his eyebrows and did that. And that was
like
his
rolled his eyes.
Yeah, he rolled his eyes. And Nixon had an opinion on just about everything, but he clammed up just like all these other presidents.
Well, look at George Bush, a senior, his reaction when somebody asked him, he got angry.
Yeah. Well, I know some things, but I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah.
He snapped. He was getting pretty on in years. And they cut that short. People who
on enough in years, but he was still grabbing girls' butts. Remember that one?
Yeah.
I don't like any of these people, so I'm not a big. Only president I like in a lot. I liked Eisenhower for the fact that he tried to get to this information. He, in a sense, I think. I mean, the story you had his granddaughter, right? Laura Eisenhower.
She's spoken out, and his she's like great granddaughter, and his
great
granddaughter Susan has also spoken out.
Yeah,
and then people still, some people don't want to hear it, or they don't believe.
I'd love to have her on the show, Laura.
Yeah, I tried to put as much amazing mountain of circumstantial and anecdotal evidence together, because we don't have the hard proof of the film footage, and supposedly there is film footage of Eisenhower meeting with these people. and you can see that recreated in the
question
movie,
is,
The 11th Green.
Wherever this stuff was kept or being kept or whatever, you think I mean, look at the records that have already been destroyed. I fear that somebody didn't that they out of fear of it being exposed would destroy it.
Possibly. Remember Don Phillips of Skunk Works said that I was shown this special file on this information that had to deal with this material we were working with on aerial space technology. And it said Eisenhower met with extraterrestrials, and he said to them, "You're so powerful, how can we stop you?" You know, Eisenhower was deeply concerned about disrupting the American society, our way of life, our stock market, sending everything crashing to the ground.
The energy market. I mean,
yeah.
Look at if you go and look at all the people that have been involved in anti-gravity and zero-point energy, how many suicides
just happen to turn up dead.
Yeah, you know, I mean, how fearful the energy markets are of this technology. I mean, you got to think about it. Raytheon, Lockheed, they're all tied to these big banks like BlackRock, and they even though their specialty is making military weapons, they have a ties to the energy market. They're not going to want to screw up the energy market either.
Do you remember about 15, 20 years ago, Art Bell would report on this, and so did Linda Moulton Howe, these NASA scientists who were working like in some aspect of the space program started turning up dead. One body was found stuffed in a tree, and they just, like an amazing number of scientists just happened to either die of an accident or suicide, and like, oh my gosh, this is scary, yeah. And so what did they know, and what were they a part of? Today we have something called Space Force. I confess I'm still not exactly sure what that is and what they do every day, but at least we have more people involved, and NASA going to the moon, as you point out. We're having no choice because the Chinese really are pushing for this.
Right. They got a rover there now, supposedly.
Yeah, where they might have control of satellites in space that revolve around Earth. So we're very concerned about what the Chinese are up to. So we have no choice but to go back to the moon.
Yeah, they did a Space Force really stupid TV show on Netflix. And the Chinese and Americans are there, and they're literally like rolling past each other in these these things on the moon, and they're like looking at each other because they're both going to each other's bases, and they destroy each other's bases. Like, yeah, that's probably what'll happen.
Set up with a death race, a drag race on the moon. There.
Yeah, that's what it was. It could get that stupid. Who knows? But that's the thing. I'm like, if my theory is correct about the moon, they have to worry with the people finally starting to get past the technology now to get to the moon. I mean, I've always been shocked that the Russians gave up, after we went. Why didn't they go? According to one cosmologist, because we never went. I don't believe that, but that was one cosmonaut, one Russian cosmonaut, a guy who was involved in the program, says he spoke to NASA astronauts, and they said, no, it was all fake, and that's why. But maybe that's just their way of, explaining their failure to get there. Or did we use alien tech that we never revealed to get past that radiation belt to get to the moon? I don't know, but I think we went to the moon. I honestly do.
I do too. There were several trips there. All the engineers had to have been lying. All the astronauts, all the spacecraft that you can go see in like the Houston Space Center, somehow that was all faked. And, it's too much.
Stanley Kubrick.
Oh, well, you remember there was a James Bond movie in which the James Bond was driving this lunar rover and he crashed through the set, and they're filming this fake moon landing.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny. I think that was...
Oh, no, that was a Moonraker. That was Diamonds Are Forever. Yeah, when he... Yeah, that was good. I'm thinking of Moonraker. But, I don't believe we faked the moon landing. I hope not. I mean, maybe we faked one or two for budgeting. I don't know. I don't know, but I would hate to think Neil Armstrong would lie. He was always, when I was a kid, like kind of a little hero of mine, a little bit of a hero. And
it was Nixon who shut it down. He apparently felt...
Damn Nixon, we blame him for everything.
Yeah, we had 2 more space
petrodollar
missions left, and we didn't have enough money, he claimed. And so he just scrubbed the next two, and that's where it's stayed ever since, like around 71 or 72. I will also point out, I've mentioned before, I don't go for far out conspiracy theories. I've never seen a UFO. How about you two?
I have, yes. When I was like 16 in downtown Michigan City, where I live, with
Wow.
4 others, flew right over our heads. It was cylindrical, no lights on it, but it had like these kind of blocks in it. It was like very blocky in its structure, but it was cylindrical, and it 500 feet up maybe, very low, and just flew like the Star Destroyer in Star Wars coming over our heads is what it was. And I felt like this weird feeling in my head, and they must have too, because everybody didn't. There's no sound, but we all looked up like we felt it. And then most of those people couldn't remember it the next day.
That sounds very similar to a guy I met here in my apartment swimming pool. He said he lived in this town, and in his neighborhood as a kid, he was playing, and he and the other neighbors looked up and saw this thing go silently overhead, and they knew it was not of this world. And
yeah, there's no way.
Yeah,
There's no way you're putting that much tonnage floating in the air silently.
Not man-made, no.
No.
So I get people who come up to me and tell me their UFO stories, including a church-going, like 95-year-old woman who lives across
that's awesome.
the hall from me. It was like
That's
the last
awesome.
person I expected. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What did she say?
She said she was a little girl on a farm in Alabama, and she and her father were walking across the farm, and they could see in the distance a spacecraft came down. Your typical like saucer with tripod legs, I think, or little skinny legs. And she wanted to go see it. And her dad held her back and said, "No, let's just go let them do whatever it is they're doing. You can
Smart
watch
guy.
it. Don't go near it." And she said, my daddy made sure he held on to me, and we watched, and it eventually took off. And this is like the last person I expected to get such a story from.
Wow.
She was a very conservative,
and
Bible
she's
lady.
yeah, and she's what, 95, and she said she was a little girl. So how we're talking 80 something years ago.
Yeah, she's got no reason to lie. She wasn't a drunk or anything like that. That's another thing. I don't drink alcohol whatsoever or use drugs. I try to be sober and clear-minded all the time. I'd love to see a UFO. I turn on the Travel Channel and someone's got a UFO from right here over my hometown on a street I go up and down all the time. Well, I didn't
Oh,
see
no way.
It's driving me crazy. Well, how come they put some video footage of this, like this metallic cube that was twisting around in the sky over this street that I live right near? And I didn't see this. I'm not going to make anything up.
Yeah, that's the only one I've ever seen, and I've always had a fascination with it. And I mean, I did have an instant in Red River Gorge, Kentucky, when I was camping, where I saw a giant light come out of the forest floor after I had a vivid dream about being abducted.
Ooh.
So
Dream or recreation of what actually...
Right. That's always been the question. I wrote it off as a dream for many years until I read my friend Terry Lovelace's book, Incident at Devil's Den, which is about his camping trip, which much more horrifying experience for him than mine. But it brought up memories of that camping trip and made me reevaluate it and that experience. And his was at 30, they were talking, or, it was like a giant, like football field size triangular UFO, 5 stories high, thick-wise, that took him and his friend in the 70s when he was in the Air Force. He was on a camping trip. I don't know if you've ever read Terry Lovelace's book, but I highly recommend that as well. Like I said, opened my eyes to my own experiences. But that's one thing they have not touched in these hearings is UFO abductions. I don't think they want to touch that at all.
Yeah, that's some scary stuff right there. They don't want to panic anyone. I'm sure everyone is in agreement on that.
But then you get, because also you get in UFO abductions, you talk about my labs, which are people are having military alien cooperation in their abduction. What's going on there? Or is that private contractors working with aliens? Who is in control? Who is doing the dealings? Okay, we elected Richard Nixon, and at some point he might have been the guy negotiating with aliens for some, because you point out about Project Serpo, which came out in the early 2000s as a conspiracy theory that we sent people on missions with aliens, like an exchange program, basically. And you talk about in the book of how Nixon could have been diplomatically organizing that, or in charge of that, or a part of that, or that date, February 19th, right? Too, isn't that connected to another February 19th.
Right. The Eisenhower encounter happened on February 19th, where there allegedly was an agreement. So Nixon just happened to show up at an Air Force base and dealt with alien matters on February 19th, 1973, which was the 19th anniversary. 1 year later, he returned to Homestead, returned to Key Biscayne, and his files are almost like blanked out for this period. He flies home to Washington, and on the anniversary of the 19th, he's back at the White House. But the days before it, very mysterious and very suspicious. That would have been the 20th anniversary of the Eisenhower encounter, in which there was apparently an agreement. So that lends even more intrigue to what Nixon was doing and what he and Jackie could have seen additionally that we were never told.
Yeah, I think Jackie would have said something to Beverly if he was like, and I met living aliens. If he went as far as telling he saw dead bodies, he would have told her about the living aliens. That's what my thoughts on it. We got a question here from Craig in the chat room. Is what is your opinion of Chris Carter? I'm assuming he's talking about X-Files, who seems to know a lot.
He does, and the X-Files is being resumed. They're going to...
by Disney. Dear God, just wait for them to kill that franchise.
Well, let's give them the benefit of the doubt first. They might do something well. The problem, I think, is they've sapped all the supernatural stories the first time around, and they ran out of steam, and the show got canceled. So Chris Carter may know plenty, or may know by reading, keeping his ears open, watching other movies, gathering bits and pieces for his
Did you watch X-Files, the last version of it?
Not at the very end, no, where it started to just kind of go downhill.
Well, no. I mean, not the end of the first seasons of shows when they brought it back.
Yeah.
And did you see the speech Joe McHale's character gives? And the whole, they talk about like reverse engineered, like he's got his own reverse engineered craft, and then he talks about the whole scheme of things. I do think Chris Carter has some insight, or he's paying attention, or he's definitely way deep into this ufology stuff like us, obviously.
Or he hired writers who convinced him that, we've heard this, we've learned this, and can we put this on the air? And he said, yes, somebody knew something. But
I'll tell you what, I'll never forget, I was an X-Files fan, and I watched Lone Gunman. And 6 months before 9/11, there's an episode in Lone Gunman where they're basically exposing a plotted attack, a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center.
That's pretty creepy, isn't it? Yeah.
And then they canceled that show.
Yeah.
Right before 9/11. So I think Hollywood does have always some information.
Yeah. Has it ever been leaked, that episode?
Yeah, you can find it. I mean, like I said, it's part of their one season of episodes they had. It's out there. You can find it. But yeah, they did do that 6 months before 9/11. I mean, you got to think if there is like the media and the stuff that happens with Wag the Dog, things like that they're going to use people in Hollywood. That's the whole Stanley Kubrick conspiracy, right? For the fake moon landing stuff. But that they might use people in Hollywood, like the Wag the Dog movie with Robert De Niro in that. And Dustin Hoffman, if you've ever seen that. They would use people in Hollywood, and that's why they would get this kind of pieces of information about the real programs and what's going on.
Some of this is distorted and even blatantly lied about, but The Simpsons did do a number of things shown on their program, even having Trump run for president and come down an elevator to greet the press. Exactly what he did. It's almost as if his people saw this. Let's try.
And we're like, let's troll that. Yeah. I always wondered that too.
Yeah. And
there's a lot of things. The Simpsons did it. The Simpsons did it.
There's a whole bunch of, there's a whole list of ones that are on.
Oh, yeah.
You can see the clips of they showed long before they happened. And so I don't know what to tell you. Somebody wrote a book called The Titan about this huge ship on its maiden voyage that went down in the Atlantic from an iceberg. And it's exactly what happened. Just eerie, well in advance.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a whole conspiracy theory to that, too. How long? I mean, the Titanic. I mean, seriously. I mean, all these mysteries we still have all these years, and more that come.
Of all the ships that they could have named it, come up with any crazy name, they called it the Titan. And what happened to the Titanic? It mirrored exactly what happened in that book, well before the Titanic took off on its.
Well, there's a whole conspiracy theory that the Titanic was a whole setup it was sabotaged to sink. It was a whole money scheme. It's a long story, and that they might have copied, did that on purpose. I don't know.
Well, my brother points this out. What did Watergate reveal to us? What did it tell us? People in government conspired to pull crimes. Then they conspired to cover it up.
To cover it up.
So there were conspiracies. There's like 2 of them, big ones, in the Watergate scandal. So we do know that our government has people who are capable of A, pulling criminal activities, and B, lying to you about it to try to cover things up so they don't go to prison. So it really helped to erode the American trust in government from Watergate to this point, where we've been lied to so many darn times, your head starts spinning when you find out things are the opposite of what they assured us.
Eisenhower, most people trusted when the president said something, it was the truth. But then Eisenhower gets screwed over by his own intelligence community, who tell him, there's no way anybody's going to know Gary Powers was shot down over Russia.
Yeah,
there's no way. Don't just lie to the American public. So Eisenhower gets up and has to lie to the American public, and then has to retract that after it's exposed.
Yeah,
and tell the people that he lied. And that's like one of the first times an American president had to get on and say, "Yeah, I didn't tell you the truth," and that's the beginning of the end of American trust in government.
Yeah, and then just before Nixon, Lyndon Johnson further eroded people's trust in government with these statements. Victory's right around the corner. We're going to win this war. Westmoreland would come out and say these things about how well we're doing in Vietnam, and it was just the opposite. And Nixon capitalized on this, and I'll be honest with you, and instead he lied just as much, if not more.
Because they all work for the military-industrial complex, except for my favorite president, Kennedy. I don't think he was killed because of aliens. I think he was killed because he fired Allen Dulles, and he was going to get us out of Vietnam completely. He was done with it, and the whole Bay of Pigs thing. And Howard Hunt in his taped confessions his son did before his death. He didn't say anything about aliens, if I remember right. There's nothing in there about aliens, but what he said to the lawyer, he did mention that they killed him because of our closest secrets. Yeah. But he did say that Kennedy was a traitor, that he was proud of his involvement in the assassination, because Kennedy was a traitor. He was given secrets to Russia. What secrets were those? Alien technology.
Yeah,
he also
wanted to share that. Yeah.
But, pretty much they felt the Kennedys were traitors just because of what happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis. We made an agreement to take our ICBMs out of Turkey in secret and kowtowed. They wanted a whole nuclear war. They thought we could win against Russia. So he was not, the intelligence community, the military, he could have made any more enemies in his 3 years of presidency than he did.
Just within days of taking office, Lyndon Johnson told the media something that they were startled by and printed, that Johnson said, "I need to meet with Dwight Eisenhower. I'm going to California." And he said it for February 19th and 20th, 1964, the exact 10-year anniversary of Eisenhower flying to Palm Springs. Here goes Lyndon Johnson on that same date and met with Eisenhower. You can see the pictures of them two together. And in the records, Eisenhower and Lyndon Johnson huddled a couple of times. And there's gaps in Johnson's schedule. And I put that in the book that I'm glad you enjoyed. You can't say absolutely Johnson got his own ET encounter at an airbase. But there is this source that Linda Moulton Howe dug up, Dr. Edward Moraine, who said there was an encounter between American Air Force officials, and I think he said the president, in '64. So what are we
Johnson
to believe? Yeah, he was president.
It sounds like Kennedy might have. You mentioned this in the book. What was the air base?
There were a couple air bases, smaller ones in the Palm Springs area. And then where Kennedy just had to go on vacation. 3 times he met with Eisenhower out in Palm Springs himself in private. Why can't they speak over the phone, exchange letters, or have their assistants, their aides, talk back and forth? They had to huddle in private over something really, really important. So, you can start drawing some fairly reasonable conclusions.
And I got Adrian. Hold on the phone. I think it's Adrian. In that Taken series, there's a moment where they do this whole kind of like, you see Kennedy's reflection, and it's beautiful. You see Kennedy's reflection in the mirror of this alien in a tube there asking questions of this general who's a major character in it about the aliens, and he's like, those damn Kennedys afterwards, they gotta go, because he's talking about sharing the secrets with Russia, right? But I've always been wondered, like I said, fascinated if, Kennedy did have exposure to it, because it seems like Truman, I mean, even maybe even before Truman, Roosevelt, Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon were presidents who all were shown, given almost the full disclosure. But at some point that stops, I don't think. I don't think they do that with presidents anymore.
They gave them maybe little tidbits, bits and pieces, but I think you're correct. From Roosevelt to Nixon, I think presidents knew plenty, knew how to keep their mouth shut, felt that the American people were not ready for this. And I don't know, you can argue all day, but you could make a case that maybe they were right. Maybe the American public just wasn't ready to handle this. There were no TV shows or very many movies about aliens.
War of the Worlds.
Yeah.
That doesn't inspire you to go tell people.
That'll scare the heck out of you, that.
Right. But who started to change that perspective? Spielberg. Yep. All right, let me get to the phone call. Who do we got on the line?
It's Adrian from Connecticut.
Hey,
Hi,
Adrian.
y'all. Yes. Hi. Yeah. One thing that just doesn't fit with my thinking after everything I've heard with Jackie Gleason, if he had such a knowledge base and interest in aliens and UFOs, and then he actually goes and sees 4 bodies, it just doesn't seem right to me that he would be so shocked. It seems like there's got to be more to that story.
Yeah,
we haven't even talked about what the aliens looked like.
I mentioned that earlier, that he may have seen something more. Terry had a question that was on the bottom of the screen. Well, what were those 4 bodies like? I always revert, and I do in my book, in my interviews, to the 1955 Kentucky UFO extraterrestrial case near Hopkinsville. The Sutton family saw these little dwarfish aliens with big ears and big bug eyes and little bodies. They were like 2.5 feet tall. And that's exactly what Gleason described to his wife, that he saw on these examining tables at Homestead Air Force Base. They looked like they could have been the same race from Jackie's description, with strangely big ears. I'm not sure why an alien race would evolve that way, but the bug eyes for great vision, you would assume, but ears? In many of the cases of descriptions of gray aliens, they have no ears at all. They have maybe a little nodule or something, maybe auditory system internally. The Jackie Gleason ones from Homestead, what Nixon allowed him to see and that he spoke of, were quite dead, and they were small, 2.5 feet tall. And there's a question, and I don't know the positive answer to this, but it's possible Nixon also showed Gleason an extraterrestrial craft at the base after they looked at the bodies. And there's an interesting source who responded to a MeTV online article on the Nixon-Gleason encounter, since MeTV shows the honeymooners, the Jackie Gleason show. So they did this story, and somebody wrote in and said, I happen to know that the story is true, that Nixon showed Gleason a craft in an airplane hangar, and the hangar is so large you can see it from the highway that goes past the base, at least in the old days, and that it was a live craft, that is, it was held down with cables, and it was floating up in the air in this aircraft hangar. Now, that's a very interesting level of detail. It sounds like almost from somebody who might have been there, or at least heard from somebody who was there. Whether that story's true or not, I don't know, but it seems at least possible that Nixon would go the full 9 yards for that $1 million and say, all right, here's what they crashed in, or here's a craft that is similar,
Yeah, but even with that, you'd think he'd come home elated and wow, but no, he wouldn't eat. He was shocked, smoking, drinking. Like it was a bigger surprise than what
he did have moments of
described.
elation,
really
according to what Beverly said. He did have moments where he was very like high wired, excited.
Right. just all giddy that he got to see the proof above all other people. And it resolved this question that he had for like over 20 years. Are we being visited? He saw the proof. Now, since my book came out, someone wrote an article and mentioned some Hollywood producer people talked to Jackie in private, and they talked about UFOs. Naturally, a big surprise there. And they said that Jackie told them, Nixon showed me the proof. And they said, really, what? And he said, that's all I want to tell you. Nixon showed me the proof. I know we're being visited. So that confirms what's in Beverly Gleason's story and what's in my book. Jackie didn't want to tell about it. He had secrecy oaths. He told Beverly, I was sworn to secrecy after we left that air base laboratory, that Nixon said, you're not supposed to talk of this. Let's take an oath. And he violated it as soon as he got home that midnight. And then he held on to it, I think, for the rest of his life.
Yeah, maybe he had a Men in Black experience or something like that. Because flip-flopping from positive to negative, it doesn't match. It doesn't fit my.
It could have been tapping his phone after that whole thing. You got to think about this, Adrian and Paul, is after this happened, word started to probably spread within the intelligence community that was involved in this. Like, hey, Nixon took his golf buddy to see aliens. We got a problem. And they'd start keeping a close eye on Gleason.
Yeah,
who was he talking to?
Yeah, send somebody to his house and remind him gently or very overtly, you're not to talk about this with anyone. Remember, the president swore you to secrecy. And I think that could have shook him up.
Yeah, I have a feeling. Okay, thanks for your input.
Thank you, Adrian. Good night. You too. I mean, I think anybody, in the 1970s, even if he was super interested in aliens and believed in the paranormal, when he got actually the proof and seen it, would be shaken. Especially if it was beyond not what he even expected, these little 2.5 foot tall aliens with ears and eyes. And yeah, when you gave that description before I read it, I was already thinking the Hobsonville gremlins. Yeah. Steven Spielberg had an idea. I think you talk about the Steven Spielberg. Yeah, and I knew this too. He had the idea about almost before Gremlins was made, like a Gremlin. He wanted to do the Hobsonville kind of story.
He really wanted to do that even before Close Encounters. So he divided it two different ways: Close Encounters and then Gremlins, where you saw these pointy-eared little goblin type, 2 foot tall little alien type beings or whatever they were. That Spielberg, I've said this a number of times on this show and others, I think he knows plenty. He's keeping it close to the vest. Maybe also they've talked to him about generally keeping your mouth shut. They asked him once about this Ronald Reagan story, where Spielberg went to the White House to show E.T. the extraterrestrial. And there's this rumor that went around for years that Reagan said after the movie, that story is true. There's like people in this room who know that story is really true. And so Spielberg kept his mouth shut for like 20 years. And he finally, a few years ago, revealed, yes, Reagan did tell me that. And he was not smiling or laughing or joking about it. So he finally did reveal that. It's another shocking story that a president, unless Spielberg was lying, and I don't think that's the case, that a president let slip, yeah, we are being visited. We got the proof. And that E.T. movie you made is really close to the mark.
Yeah, when I say it ending with Nixon, I do think like Reagan had knowledge, and you talk about some of this in the book. There was one part, I think you talk in the book about supposed conversations Reagan had when he was given the briefing, basically, on the alien encounter.
I don't know if that's real, but if it is, I'd like to see some proof. But this briefing document that was printed up, and Linda Moulton Howe got a hold of it, and it's now all over the internet, that Reagan was briefed at Camp David in March of '81, within a month or month and a half of his taking office. He really wanted to know. And remember, he had this sighting of his own that no one really disputes now, that in the mid-1974, while flying over Bakersfield, or getting close to Bakersfield, California, this lit object just paralleled his aircraft and flew out in front of it, and he urged, let's follow it. And they did for a while. and then it just zipped off really fast. And he told Nancy all about it when they landed, and he told a Wall Street newspaper, Wall Street reporter, the Washington bureau chief, this story, and the bureau chief said, "Yeah, he told me this." And then I said to Mr. Reagan, "So you're a believer in UFOs?" And his face went blank, and he thought, "I've talked too much." And to a media member, and he said, "Well, let's just say I'm agnostic on this subject," and walked away.
He was excited and then realized he screwed up.
I really talked about this. This could
He just wanted to talk to somebody about it and realized that's the worst person to talk to about it.
Even then, he wanted to be president, and he didn't want to damage his conservative credentials. So he had to.
But like I said, I feel like a lot of the power of this information was within the Republican Party for a long time because of their ties to the military-industrial complex. It's a totally different dynamic now with the political system. It's all one party. But at the time, I think a lot of Republicans had more connections to the military-industrial complex to know this information, including Reagan, just with his contacts and knowing Nixon. You point out in the book that he could have gotten some of this information from Nixon. And in a conversation, doesn't he say, the supposed conversation at Camp David, that Nixon told him about a crash?
Exactly, yes. That once again, Reagan says in this transcript of this conversation that Nixon showed me this device that we got from a crashed spacecraft. And as you go back to the Eisenhower encounter book that I wrote, that's part of the story, that they retrieved something from the Aztec, New Mexico, supposedly
1948
communications device, and started communicating back and forth with this race. And that could have been easily what Nixon had a grip on, and even showed Reagan, a fellow California conservative. And by golly, Nixon was more of a force in getting Reagan elected. And I'm doing research on Reagan, and that he was an advisor quite close to President Reagan in his first years in office.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ties there, and it could well be a factual event.
Nixon could have been using Reagan and their friendship to try to get a little bit more info for himself and back into the program even a little bit.
Maybe, maybe vice versa, that Reagan wanted to know more.
To know too,
maybe knew some things, and Nixon wanted to know more.
And they're all being shut out by these private contractors at times. But you look what he did. Look what Reagan did, though. Reagan goes and starts the Star Wars program. Now, of course, it's the Cold War, and we're going to shoot down nukes with this. But what if this was a theme related to defense against extraterrestrial threat? Because we were talking last week with Paul Anthony Wallace about this town in England where they were working on this Star Wars project, and all these engineers and scientists that were involved in the project, there was 57 suicides.
Oh my goodness!
Even Margaret Thatcher had to address it. That there's nothing to see here, basically.
Just happened to
commit suicide. Somebody's like, that's statistically impossible. That 57 people. I mean, what do you got going on here? All these people are killing themselves.
Well, you know the old expression, "Dead men tell no tales."
Exactly.
You'll have no leaks when you're dead. There was an old mafia slogan by Carlos Marcello: 3 can keep a secret if 2 are dead.
Yeah, and you speak of the mafia. I mean, look at Richard Nixon had all these mafia ties. There was the mafia involved in the CIA and Kennedy's assassination. And, the mafia had strong ties and control within our government for a long time. And
and it's shocking to us now, but they had their hands in a lot of stuff. They were extremely powerful in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. Nixon resigned from office, and one of the first times he appeared in public was to go golfing with 2 gangster types, like a public golf course. And they thought, well, that's not good for his reputation.
He needed money.
Yeah.
That's what probably it was, And that's the thing. I mean, there, organized crime involved, and, the CIA, there's so much dirty stuff going on. And so much probably paranoia within our own government about who's going to find out what or use what, or do we have to keep this secret? Imagine finding out that the guy, Nixon goes and shows these bodies to Gleason. You talk about in the book that was it the next day Henry Kissinger and him had a meeting?
Yeah.
I would love to be a fly on the wall of that meeting.
House. Yeah. Like the next day, Nixon flew to a couple of places, including the Redstone Arsenal, which is where a lot of space program stuff goes on, in Alabama. And then he flies back to the White House. So and he meets with Kissinger, his foreign policy advisor. And what they talked about behind closed doors, only a small amount of the Nixon bugging of himself has been released to the public. For some reason, they're holding back quite a few tapes of what went on in Nixon's time where he bugged the Oval Office. And I think...
who's holding it back?
Probably the Nixon estate. You have to kind of sue to get access.
Would it be considered government property?
I beg your pardon?
Would it be considered government property?
That's been a legal issue for years and years, whether Nixon's estate can hold on to it because he was the one that bugged it, or that the public has a right to know because he was an American president, our representative, in a sense, in Washington.
In a federal building with, it doesn't matter if he owns the bug equipment. You're recording.
Revenue paid for all of this, so we should.
Right.
So
we should get it.
Yeah, they've been trying to stall this out for a long time.
Well, that's the thing with the whole disclosure amendment. It's like, I want to say to and I love Tim Burchett for what he's doing, but I want to say to him and Luna and them, it's like, welcome to the party, pal. Like, you guys need to start looking into all this UFO history, because there's plenty of trails for you to follow. Plenty of trails for you to follow to dig up that, from the past that you should be looking into. Like,
be a pretty brave politician to start digging into this, going public, risking being called a space cadet and you're nuts or something like this. Burchett.
But you're seeing public support for people now. I see a lot of support for Tim Burchett.
Yeah.
He's put his face out there more than any of them on.
Yeah. He has recently come under criticism unfairly that he's revealed that it's an old trick of the Russians, and it is true, to blackmail and compromise American members of government. They try to trap you in a hotel with a hooker and secretly tape you.
What does that sound like that we're all talking about right now?
Yeah.
What is that? You want to talk about something else slowly being piecemealed out to us? Is the Epstein files. They're as slowly as possible releasing those documents, so we eventually lose care when the real dirty stuff gets out.
It's all seedy what these powerful people were doing in private. But when you start taping things and making copies of the tapes as supposedly happened, and you start blackmailing people,
it's not the Russians that just did that. I have to correct Tim Burchett. I'm like, don't just throw the Russians out there. We do it. Mossad does it.
That's what American Mafia did this. They even tried to trap the Kennedys in this manner.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a honey trap. The British used to do this. They set a honey trap for what they thought were going to be Russian agents in England, and it turned out to be government officials in what's known as the Profumo scandal during Kennedy's time. And they trapped these beautiful models that attracted men from both sides of the Cold War. Yeah,
and
they go for it.
They do it I think they do it to keep people in control in all forms of media and government. Entertainment.
They would only behave themselves like good married men and not stray to beautiful women offering their bodies, come into this room, just my room, and where they've got hidden cameras and such. And that's something that went on around the time of Watergate, believe it or not. There was a brothel just down the street, and politicians from both sides of the fence were going to this brothel. It was being run by the mafia, and they were taking video footage at the time, probably like home movies and sound, and the American people were not allowed to see this because the Congress passed a resolution
to take all
the evidence and bury it in the National Archives.
Yeah, of course they did. Let's get that out. All those people are dead now, right?
Yeah, that came out, I think, in a book by Jim Hogan or someone like that, and tried to reveal some of this. But it was so damaging for Democrats and Republicans, they actually got together and did something combined.
They always, when they combine forces, trust me, it's usually for a very bad purpose or to cover up their crimes. That's why I call them the Uniparty, because it's all a charade. That's the thing. And, people are wondering about this whole Epstein thing. I've talked about it since the inception of my show. I've talked about Epstein before he became really big news, because I recognize it right away for what it was, is that it's still the honeypot scheme that's been going on. Look, Ghislaine Maxwell's father was Mossad, most likely. I mean, pretty much. And the Mossad and CIA are two very interconnected organizations that work together on a lot of different, you could say, false flag events, stuff like that, and operations that are very nefarious and not at the best interest of either Israel or America, because they're working for military contractors again. That they would use somebody like Epstein as a go-between to do this honeypot scheme. We've heard from that they took thousands of videotape. Where's the tape? And the people's names are being thrown out there now. Powerful people. Trust me, there's a reason a lot of people keep their mouths shut. And some of these people have some real bad skeletons in their closet.
Yeah. It reminds me of what I put in my book about the early 70s in Miami. All the power brokers were coming to Miami to get away from their wives and the American public. Yep. Party on the beach, party in private. J. Edgar Hoover included used to go to the racetrack all the time in Miami. Jimmy Hoffa got himself a suite at a hotel, the Fontainebleau, I think it was, and he was kind of connected with the mafia, and they've got powerful people like Santos Traficante and Meyer Lansky. They all lived in Miami. It was just a real melting pot of powerful people.
And all those powerful people tried to dig up dirt on all the other powerful people.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. What a mess,
I mean, Nixon was doing it. Yeah. Hoover, he admired J. Edgar Hoover, so he's following in his footsteps because Hoover had tried to have dirt on everybody. Yeah. When he was a closet, homosexual.
Just up the coast from Miami, Palm Beach, the Bushes, the Kennedys, the Trumps. They're all down there over the past 5 or 6 decades, and this is their playground. And you get the probably the mindset that you can do anything you want. And
NASA. You're talking about NASA's there. We're talking about the Cold War times with Cuba, and it was look how much money and effort was spent to try to get us to invade Cuba. That Kennedy, basically wrecked for him.
Even athletes, they had celebrity golf tournaments, including Gleason's. Many major league teams used to have spring training, including the Yankees. So Jackie invited Joe DiMaggio and Mickey Mantle and others to that golf tournament in 1973. He was a big New Yorker, a New York Yankee fan, and there were people from all over showbiz that couldn't wait to go to Miami, maybe for partly the same reason. It's party town. Away from my family.
What stays in Miami, what happens in Miami stays in Miami.
Exactly. So that was part of the atmosphere that Nixon got involved in.
Yep.
I can do anything I want down here.
Well, I always believe, because you talk about Henry Kissinger, he was such a powerful force behind so many nefarious things when it comes to the Vietnam War, and I'm not a fan of Henry Kissinger. I'll just put it that way. Did not really cry a tear for his passing. And I think he was very heavily much involved in what was, you say, Nixon probably, is rumored to have shut down MJ-12. I believe MJ-12 at that point, one of the main people in charge left over and probably handed it off to the military contractors, and the final, whatever is left of government control of this was Henry Kissinger.
Kissinger was heavily involved in the RAND Corporation, and there are these stories that he knew a good deal about UFOs and what we're doing to reverse engineer. I put a lot of that in the book. I didn't want to get away too far from Nixon, but obviously Nixon and Kissinger were very tight. And Kissinger, as you point out, knew a lot of secrets, even from after his time in government.
There's no way somebody like that has that much influence over presidencies and stays that much embedded in our government and our policies without having dirt on other people and knowing the skeletons. We got to go to our last commercial break, and we'll open up the phone lines, guys. When we come back from this commercial break, if you want to join this conversation or have a question for our guest, Paul Blake Smith, we're talking about his book, The Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter, when we come back from the short commercial break.
Intercepted transmission of unknown origin.
Transmission? Out here?
SOS.
Human.
Unknown.
Alien. Certificate X. Exclusive engagement at the Odeon Leicester Square. Now.
Any systematized transmission indicating a possible intelligent origin must be investigated. I don't want to hear it.
In space, no one can hear you scream.
If you are interested in discovering
weekly shows named My Paranormal Soapbox, Necromancer Live Show, and the Supernatural Symposium, live on Facebook, YouTube, and InterfaceDeath.net.
This is an APAC studio presentation.
Hi, I'm Barry, owner-operator of Barry's Barometer Barn. Lately, I bet you've been lying awake at night asking yourself, how many barometers do I really need? Well, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we think you need more than one. Otherwise, we're gonna go out of business. Remember, at Barry's Barometer Barn, we don't know the meaning of high-pressure sales. Come on, folks, buy another barometer. I'm trying to put my kids through college, I've got a family to support, and a secret mistress who isn't cheap.
Visit Barry's Barometer Barn, 000 Storm Drive. Come on, folks, buy a barometer. I'm Barry's older brother, Larry, and every time one of you people walk past the store without coming in, Barry beats me.
This has been a presentation from Tim Morgan's APAC Studio. For more almost professional amateur comic studio content, visit the APAC YouTube channel. Search APAC 2002. That's APAC 2002 on YouTube.
When Alex Gardner is asleep, he has an extraordinary gift. The government wants it, the scientists want it, but to keep it may cost him his life. It might be better if Alex didn't sleep at all, but he cannot resist entering the dreamscape. Can you? See Dreamscape in the West End and all over London now. Certificate 15. It takes an extraordinary adventurer to enter the dreamscape.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from Talkstream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now, the Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Join us every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time for Weird Wednesday, the live stream, with your hosts Jamie, the Living Dead Girl, and Rob, the Phantom, where we'll talk about all things paranormal, including zodiac, astrology, tarot card and oracle card readings, live ghost boxing and spirit communication, where we'll do Voices from Beyond, the Cold Case Files. So we hope you join us live on Facebook and YouTube every Wednesday night at midnight Eastern Standard Time. We hope to see you there. Bye-bye.
Since 1948, Fate magazine has brought you reports of the strange and unknown, all of them true. Fate Radio is carrying on that tradition, bringing you the unusual, macabre, strange, and bizarre. Join host Kat Hobson Sunday nights from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern on WBHM Digital Broadcasting.
Heat 'em up.
Do, re,
Egon.
You're listening to the Paranormal Soup, bringing you the weird every Sunday night. Call into the show and join the discussion. The call-in lines are 219-230-4444. or 260-225-9419, or by Skype caller ID oojblandoo or Bland Paranormal Soup. And now to your host, Jason Bland.
Tonight's guest is Paul Blake Smith. I always enjoy having Paul on. He writes to me some of the best books in ufology, the history of these extraordinary, I guess, UFO lore to people. But to me, it's things that really happened. When it comes to his newest book, The Nixon-Gleason Alien Encounter, or President Eisenhower's Close Encounters, or MO41, Bombshell Before Roswell. These are some excellent books. If you are a person like Jackie Gleason was, interested in ufology and the history of it, no better person's books to go to than Paul Blake Smith. Now, the phone lines are open. If anybody can call in, I don't know if Adrian did, I forgot to ask, on the 260-225-9419. That'd be great. You help me test out that phone line. Join the conversation. We're going to less than a half hour left, so let's go ahead and get back to our guests. Only got a little bit of time left, Paul, about less than a half hour. But again, I truly been looking forward to this show all week and it's gone by so fast because I love this time period between the 40s to the 70s with these presidents. I've always been fascinated with presidents and the UFO subject and the relationship to it. Kennedy, Nixon, Eisenhower, all these, these powerful people are in this position that at one point we actually had some control or say over it. Now I don't believe we do. But I believe there's the key, like I said, for Tim Burchett or Luna or these representatives in Congress. This is the rabbit holes they need to go down. They're trying to look into things that are happening now. These are just, they're not going to get anywhere. But there's information here. There's things they could get a hold of that have been tucked away somewhere that would blow the lid off of everything.
I'm not a high-tech guy, but I always go on an interview and half serious and half jokingly say, anyone want to tap into some government files and leak it ourselves? Take the bull by the horn and do whatever you got to do. And somebody supposedly leaked that Skinny Bob file. Remember that was
from Russia.
It used to be a KGB file from 1942. And it's pretty darn realistic looking. I can't say absolutely that's an alien, but it sure looks like one. And it's
according to my friend Terry Lovelace, that's one of the closest things he's seen to what he's encountered.
I read one description. The guy says, "I work with CGI all the time." That is not CGI, so that's a real deal. So I
played in my B-roll before the show.
That, because it's so darn real and intriguing. His forehead bulbously pulses a little bit and his eyelid comes down and he looks around and he's got the little skinny arms. And at one point they show him and he kind of almost smiles for the camera like he knows he's on camera. And that the Russians were interacting with this creature that managed to communicate, whether verbally or mentally. So that's the backstory of this leaked document. Came out, I think, in 2011. And that's an example of somebody leaked something or hacked into something. There was another case, I forget the guy's name, rather famously said he leaked into some files and saw...
McKenna.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's the guy. What do you think of that story? Could you explain that to the...
I mean, they sure as heck, he sure as heck did definitely hack into it. I mean, we know that from the legal trouble he got into.
Yeah, I mean...
why lie? He's about it. Did he think it would? I don't know. I mean, he was looking for it. He got hacked in. Maybe he saw nothing and just lies about it to get something out of it. I don't think so. I think he's telling the truth of what he saw, and that goes back and all connected to the maybe the alien exchange program or Serpo or or the secret fleet. You have people have talked about this. You mentioned Corey Goode in the book. I'm not a big fan of his, but when you get into the secret space force and stuff like that, I think he pulls from is that knowledge has been around, that we are. But I honestly don't think it's our government. I think it's military contractors. That's the secret. We have people with personnel that are working with them But I think so much of this is out of our hands. It's hard for me to imagine that we're trying to put together a real Space Force now, supposedly. Maybe it's already been there.
I'm intrigued by this 2017 leaked document that I include in the back pages, my appendix of my book. And it mentions, it's from a 1989 Defense Intelligence Agency document that mentions in the 1970s, we had diplomatic exchanges that we would send some of our best people in an alien craft with them to go up in space, or maybe.
Isn't that what happens at the end of Close Encounters? I mean, seriously.
Something like that, yeah. And so that in exchange, some aliens came out and spoke to us at an airbase. And this went on during Nixon's time. Whether it continued after, I don't know, but it said in the early 70s. So once Nixon was out of there, and we have to ask ourselves, why did Nixon buy a beachfront home in Key Biscayne as soon as he became president? Never went back there after he resigned and sold it. Why did he have to go there when he had a big beachfront home?
California.
Yeah, and
just as beautiful and sunny.
San Clemente. And he had this big, beautiful estate, and he would go there a fair amount. So why did he need Key Biscayne in the first place and go back and forth to Homestead Air Force Base all the time?
It's a center of power. You really point out how much of a center of power this. Operation 40 was based out of Miami, too. With Howard Hunt and all that. That whole group is focused on Cuba in their initial setup. But, I mean, in a sense, the people that he ended up hiring were all based out of there, too.
The biggest non-Langley, Virginia CIA base in the world was in the Miami area.
Yeah.
They trained Cuban exiles to out in No Name Key and in the Miami swamps out in the rural countryside to get ready to invade Cuba. And, of course, that fell apart. But Nixon was in charge of some of that planning when he was vice president.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew some of these people, and they were hired as his burglars to break into the Watergate Hotel. So Nixon knew plenty and kind of kept his mouth shut after he resigned. And the Watergate burglars eventually must have been paid off because they generally kept their mouths shut too. But we've been able to piece this together in books and bits and pieces that have been revealed over the years. That, again, Miami was this party atmosphere for the rich and powerful, and they had their home bases down there. So many people. Kennedy, as president, would fly in and out of Homestead Air Force Base. He may have been the one that wanted this set up down there, this secret lab in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kennedy was making moves to try to get it back into American government control and away from the contractors. Just knowing how he operated and the enemies he made, the way things he did, and what we know of now in history, is that if he knew if he listened to Eisenhower's warning, he might have been trying to do something about it.
Yeah, he also pieced together a nuclear arms detonation program, or to cease the nuclear test program. That's something that Eisenhower kind of wanted done, but this was the thing that aliens came down to talk to him about in 1954. Stop test detonating these nuclear bombs. You're poisoning the atmosphere and the land and the sea. So Kennedy got it done, and it's kind of held to this day. But you can still test something, and what's going to happen to a bomb that you do secretly. Are we going to be able to detect it out in, let's say, Siberia or out in the South Pacific or something? But generally that agreement is held. But apparently there's a number of stories that aliens are deeply concerned that we're wrecking the planet or on the verge of doing so, either in war or through test detonations of these nuclear weapons.
I mean, there's a famous story of Kennedy sitting in his Oval Office, and I don't know if it was which person told this story, but they said the most time they ever saw Kennedy disturbed was when he had a scientific advisor, telling them about these detonations and the nuclear testing, telling them that they're getting radiated fallout that we can actually measure from the testing that it is affecting the atmosphere. And he asked them, and it's raining outside, could that be fallout right now in that rain? And he goes, yeah, possibly. And he said Kennedy just sat there and stared out the window, and it's the most disturbed he'd ever seen him
Yeah, he did love his small children, and he wanted a better world for them. And all parents do, and
Right.
most people are probably against setting off recklessly all these atomic bombs. It's been made into a movie. Gosh, it was narrated by, I think, William Shatner. A Trinity and Beyond, I think it's called, and it shows you how crazy we were setting off these bombs in the ocean, up in the atmosphere, down in the ground, and just recklessly putting radiation and fallout in our land, sea, and air.
In the movie, I love Oliver Stone in his movie 13 Days. Kennedy is in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they're testing, and they end up doing a nuclear test without him even knowing. You know, and it was
in Nevada.
I don't remember, but I'm trying to remember. It was the Air Force general.
The heavy-set one with the cigar. Oh gosh, but we can't think. He ran for vice president. Curtis.
Yeah. Curtis LeMay, and I just love that, and I've heard the original because Kennedy had his tapes too. He recorded the conversations of him, Curtis LeMay telling him, "Well, you're in a real tough bind here, Mr. President," and he goes,
"Well,
he goes, you mean we are?"
Yeah.
In the movie, he goes, "You haven't noticed, we are."
I was going to put it in my book, but in 53, 54, Curtis LeMay was working on a plan. First strike against the Soviet Union.
Yeah, the guy was insane. The guy was insane.
Yeah, it was insane.
This is a reason why Kennedy is my favorite president. Because this is one of the most.
Eisenhower said, "Stop! No, we're not going to attack like Pearl Harbor all of Russia." And Curtis LeMay was bomb happy. He just wanted.
Yeah, but it shows you the mentality of the military at the time, and who knows what our mentality is now when they talk about going to war with Russia or going to war with China and all this stuff, the mentality of here. And at that time, it's like it was, we have more nukes than them. This is our time. If we want to stop them before they outpace us, we got to do it. We can survive a nuclear. We'll lose 150 million citizens, but we'll be all right. We got the bomb shelters.
Remember George C. Scott in Dr. Strangelove. I'm not saying we wouldn't get our hair mussed, but we would, be way ahead. They'd have like 100 million dead, Mr. President. We need to do this. And it's just, that's how insane it was.
But that's why Kennedy's my favorite president, because he fought off that. He fought off a whole. I mean, it's not just Curtis LeMay he's fighting off. He's fighting off the whole military-industrial complex at this point. He totally botched their plans for invading Cuba. Because they lied to him. They lied to him repeatedly.
Yeah. He wanted the generals on the Joint Chiefs of Staff all pushed for an invasion, a military invasion of Cuba. And it turns out the Russians had far more nuclear offensive weapons that they could have fired at us on the island. And they were just it would have triggered everything.
We found this out in 2013 because they had a reunion of the Russian soldiers that were there in Cuba, and they said they had operating nuclear ICBMs or whatever missiles they were or whatever, and they were standing orders where if they were to be attacked to launch on America.
Programmed to hit American cities on the East Coast.
Yep.
And it would have been just the worst nightmare. And thankfully, Kennedy had the wherewithal to calmly get us through that, even though he kind of lied here and there. There wasn't any trade-off with these Jupiter missiles in Turkey, but actually...
But he had to. That was the agreement.
Yeah, and so...
That was the agreement.
Yeah. So
Otherwise, we went to war.
Through that mess. I don't even know what's down there today. What's left in Cuba, Castro's Cuba, that the Russians installed that could be sitting in a missile silo. Do we know exactly? Have Americans been down there inspecting that?
I don't know, but I see people. You want to know why Russia doesn't want Ukraine and NATO? You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's their Cuba. I mean, we've done it. We've put missiles up their ass way farther than they ever put them up ours. I'm saying, it's never been a fair trade-off, and if.
Someone's being attacked.
We were ready to invade Cuba over them putting missiles there. How do you think Russia feels about us putting 18 more countries into NATO and coming right up to their border? Ukraine's the last straw, You wonder, at times about the secrets. Kennedy, the rumor was that he wanted to exchange this UFO information with Russia and have like a joint
mission to the moon, and joint UFO sharing information. That supposedly in Kennedy's time, a number of UFO squadrons would cross our radar, and we thought they were Russians. And the
could
Russians
cause a nuclear.
Thought, the same thing, that here comes a squadron of American fighter jets.
Yep.
And they were not. They would be UFOs that would veer off and just kind of disappear. So we had to have better communication. And Kennedy installed the hotline and tried to calm things. Yeah. And
well, that's why Howard Hunt said he was a traitor, because they had a spy basically staying. They had a Russian spy that the Kennedys became friends with. He had a hotline that he bypassed his own generals and intelligence agencies on. He went behind their backs and got a hotline directly to Khrushchev. Khrushchev probably had his own military he was trying to fight off at the same time. You know, why were these guys so dead set on a nuclear exchange when they have all these aliens coming to them telling them, stop?
It's just, thankfully, cooler heads have prevailed over the decades, and we have not. But who knows? We may be even closer to a nuclear holocaust today than we were, 50, 60, 70 years ago.
That's what the point I'm getting into, like Curtis LeMay mentality here going on. That's what I'm saying.
Or
when we say,
artificial intelligence, that somebody programs a system and, oh my gosh, there they go. There go the missiles, and goodbye, humanity.
We've talked about this.
The codes.
Yeah. Well, you remember the movie War Games?
Oh, yeah.
You remember in that? They had a false alarm, and they're supposed to launch the nukes.
Yeah.
And the guy doesn't. So then they want the War Games. They want the AI. This is 80s, early, way before AI and all this stuff. They were talking in this movie about how humans can't be trusted with this, and then we got to give it to artificial intelligence to make the decision. Well, you know what? How many we have, 3 times in history we know of that have been declassified between us and Russia, where we came close to nuclear exchange, and the only reason it didn't happen is because some human disobeyed orders, had a gut feeling, or knew that
we shouldn't do this.
That we shouldn't do it.
But
if you gave that to AI, forget about it.
The computerized world of AI takes over, they won't have that common sense programmed in there.
Yeah. And that's what War Games, that movie, kind of, talked about. When I was a kid, I loved that movie. I didn't understand the implications of it. Now, as an adult watching it, I'm like, wow, this is really getting into where we're headed right now.
And it's also disturbing what you can create.
Very disturbing.
CGI and artificial intelligence in audio and video. You can make a video of, let's say, a president saying the craziest things, or riding a hog around and naked or something like that. And it's going to look really real, and you can't trust it. 60 Minutes did an excellent report on this. They showed Tom Cruise playing the guitar and singing on key, and it's really him, right? Nope. They just simulated the whole thing. Tom Cruise never made this video. And that's
There's a guy who deep fakes Tom Cruise. There's a guy who deep fakes Tom Cruise,
They can make you look like you're doing the most horrendous thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And
so how can we trust any? They suddenly show us the video of Eisenhower meeting the aliens. Do we trust it?
Yeah.
That's where we're at. We've been asking for this information for decades, and then when we finally get it, we're like, I don't trust that.
Yeah, some years ago, CBS did a New Year's Eve coverage, and they had this big glowing sign right behind their reporter in Times Square, and they had to reveal later that was all CGI. We just faked the whole thing. That was advertising we wanted to get on the screen, and it looked real. CBS had to admit, we hoaxed you. And there was a golf tournament, I think, on NBC some years ago, and they had all these birds chirping and images of the whales flopping out of the ocean, like Pebble Beach or something. They had to admit that, we tweaked and added this. We sweetened the pot to make it look nicer.
Or it's like Anderson Cooper in a hurricane, standing in a puddle or whatever, and everything's like fine. Like, that's our media. We can't trust them. That's what I'm saying. We don't trust our media. We don't trust our government.
Yeah. Who can you trust anymore?
Right. So, what a perfect time to reveal everything. Nobody's going to believe it.
Yeah. So that's another mess. And you see all these UFO videos now. What has been created in somebody's little bedroom laboratory with his computer?
Not only that.
There's so much confusion out there now. When you go and even look it up, there's so much different things mixed together that It's hard to decipher now what is true, what is fake. It's all muddied up.
Well, look what they can do. I mean, they can literally put a holographic image up in the sky. It looks totally 3D and real now, right in front of witnesses. I mean, this is Project Bluebeam territory we're getting into here now. I'm not a big fan of that theory, but you know, they really could fake anything they wanted and fool us and think whatever, you know. I mean, if this was all, I think aliens have come here. I think we have the technology, but we can't trust the sources that are now like, oh yeah, we're ready to tell you a little, you know.
All I hear, Jamie doesn't really have a cat, that this is all CGI behind her. We're led to believe that this is a real cat. It's all fake, and he would never sneak around on a live broadcast. Oh, there he goes. No, I'm just kidding, but you never know what's real anymore. If you get to
Land of Illusion
video, or let's say Roger Stone has been caught on audio tape or video.
I've seen that one where they faked that one.
Right now, oh, that's just artificial intelligence. Well, it's probably him, but what if it is?
Oh, what they didn't know, it really is kind of shady. I don't like Roger Stone, but it is really shady. They put out a video of him like he's talking on a phone, and he's like saying all this stuff.
Yeah.
But you notice you can't see his mouth move. You can't match it up because he's got the phone and he's saying all this stuff. And he's like, I did not say that. I did not. And I can honestly, he's a crooked piece of crap. But I honestly can believe him because that's what the day and age we live in. They can fake your voice and make your voice say anything. They can do it audio-wise.
And now this will be the new excuse by everybody. Oh, that wasn't me.
Exactly.
Right.
Even if you're guilty as hell.
The Epstein tapes come out.
Yeah, that's your
Bill Clinton's banging a minor, and he's like, I did not have sexual relations with that minor. That is AI manipulated.
Yeah.
Just wait. That's what's coming.
Yeah. It's going to be
Richard Branson from Virgin Galactic's going to be like, that's not me.
And now there's a video of George Carlin doing a monologue. He never said
Never
these
did.
things. Yeah.
Welcome to the Mandela effect problem here, too, you know, but... yeah, the land of illusion. That's the problem. It's like we now live in a day and age now that they're going to finally piddle out the truth to us. We can't even believe it, you know. I mean, they've done this in the hearings.
People's confused, though. Confusion's a big thing, and it's keeping us confused.
Well, remember I called this out a year before they did the actual hearings where they showed the clips of stuff, you know, the Tic Tac, and they showed the first hearings they had. They showed the triangular night vision UFO, and I called it out back then. I go, I swear to God, they're showing the crappiest of stuff because later on they're going to be like, oh, this was really this. They're showing us stuff they know can be debunked that isn't really UFOs, not the Tic Tac, but this one footage of supposedly like you see like a triangle craft and this night vision. It was on I forgot what ship it was filmed on, but it's really. And I called it out a year before they came out and go, oh yeah, that it was refraction. And many investigators pointed this out, that it was refraction of the night vision lens. That triangle shape is just refraction of light. That could be a round light. That could be any kind of shape. But because it's overloading the iris of the infrared or the night vision, it appears as a triangle because that's the iris. And they knew this. You don't tell me no CIA or government analysis or military analysis doesn't know that. But yet they released that as a part of that whole Tic Tac thing because, oh, well, look, that one's explained. A year later, oh, yeah, we explained it. So now we can forget about the Tic Tac, right?
Yeah.
It's like they throw in pieces of crap that can be debunked later, like just to illegitimize it if they want to back out of this.
I go back to that 60 Minutes interview with American pilots they did a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
They said on camera, that was pretty brave, we see these things every time we send our pilots up, you know, either a drone or a kind of probe or a disc or something that's faster, far faster than anything we've got. And it couldn't be Chinese, Korean, or Russian.
Because it doesn't show any propulsion. They can't see any mechanism of propulsion. You know, that's anti-gravity. Again, all the people who've died connected to anti-gravity research. But if that's anti-gravity, I mean, I think some of this could be ours. Some of it could be ours. Because look what I taught you about Lockheed Martin. You know, that they got this alien tech from our governments. They reverse engineered it, and then they said, oh, we didn't find nothing. Here, you can have your alien junk back. And then they actually got the reversed, you know, and they're keeping it quiet.
So there's been great advances in some cases and just a terrible mess in other cases as we go forward. What can you believe and what is a lot of nonsense, or what is like half truth, disinformation, misinformation, deliberately false, or someone goofing around with CGI or AI.
I want my Bob Lazar "I told you so" shirt. I need that shirt.
Or Philip Corso, he tried to get the truth out too, I think.
Yeah, Philip Corso. When investigators like Stanton Friedman looked into him, there's a lot of questions to some of the credibility.
Yeah, his book had a lot of mistakes in it.
Right, and that's sad. I love listening to the Philip Corso interviews on Art Bell and that. I don't know. It's like
supposedly Phil Corso's co-author loused up that book by putting in stuff that he thought would be true that wasn't part of Phil's story, or just botched.
That's the thing. Where did it get screwed up? It's like the Billy Meyer case. There's so many people got involved in that. And there's definite evidence of hoaxing going on. But then there's other stuff Billy Meyer predicted before it happened. How does he know that? Just some guy, one-armed guy in Sweden know this.
Supposedly somebody went into his home and found him like carving model spaceships, had some in the fireplace or something like this, and that really damaged his reputation.
Yeah.
And he claimed, well, I was just trying to recreate what I saw.
You're right. Right. Like I said, there's all these cases become controversial and suspected of a hoax, or was it some black site project that was disguising itself as aliens, like I'm saying is going on down in Peru. Right now. I mean, there's so much weirdness, and that's the problem with disclosure too. Is it so much history? When I did an interview for an ABC affiliate a couple of years ago, and this girl, her name was Tiffany, was this reporter I met, really nice, really smart. But what I had to say to her is, like, you're getting into this UFO thing. You were handed this by your bosses to do this story, and you're interested in all that. But welcome to the party, pals. Like, there's so much. When I listen to media types talk about these cases and stuff, or talk about it, it's like you're so out of your depth. You're so not been exposed to this. And there's so much history. There's so much history to this. You need to start opening some books and really get into this.
They're very cynical. Some of them are closed-minded. They still want to take that Tim Russert attitude that we talked about before we went on the air to kind of mockingly or snidely say, oh, you believe in aliens. You saw a UFO.
Yeah.
How about that? Now, what about your credibility now? And it's sad. The media sometimes will print the story and sometimes louse it up. And the government will tell you some things, and we don't know what to believe.
But at the same time, we have some of the top people in the UFO names out there that have pushed crap. I'm not going to say who.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? There's people out there who people respect that I'm sorry, I don't, because they pushed complete crap. Like, they should know it's crap.
Well, I'll reemphasize here as we're at the end of the show. I try to put in what I believe is true.
Don't. That's why I love your books.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
That's exactly why I want people to read your book, because stop listening to some of the crap out there. I mean, I saw ufologists get involved in QAnon, for God's sakes.
Well,
I'm saying, that's what I'm saying. There's just in the ufology has had some real big fraudsters, and we've had some people that are just shamelessly going to promote anything that gets attention, no matter how much people try to tell them real researchers that that's a hoax, obviously, and they ignore it just because it's gonna sell on History Channel, or it's gonna sell on some other network as a UFO special or something like that.
Beg people to take some of this down. And they won't take it down.
We need honest, hard truth and facts, and that's why I love your books, because you have your little speculations and stuff in this, but you're really just presenting the facts and the history that you can find, and that's what I want, and that's what I want in these books, and that's why I truly love every book I've read of yours. Before we go, what's your? I mean, I know you're talking about a screenplay, but do you have another future book in the works, or?
Yeah, I've got a couple of books in the works, including a kind of a remastering of the Cape Girardeau story from 1941 with some new tidbits of information. Nothing too blockbuster. But my agent's trying to work a deal. Hopefully we'll get something through, and that could open up the gates to something else. My books are found on Amazon.com, and Tantor.com has an excellent narrator named Tom Baer who reads them for audio tapes over the course of like 10 hours. so you can get it that way. And if you're going on a cross-country trip, stick that in your technology. So I'm honored to have so many nice reviews, people saying kind things, and buy 100 books for your friends, I tell them. I'm not a rich man. I do the best I can on a shoestring budget. I hope to do maybe one on Ronald Reagan. I need to find out something a little more obscure. And then we all know about the 1974 airplane incident. I need a little more data than that.
I think you should do one on Kennedy. Maybe I'm personal bias because I'm a Kennedy fan, but I really love to have a good book on that.
Yeah, like you said, maybe RFK Jr. will start to reveal something.
I wish. I right now, not while he's in the middle of a campaign. He's already been called a conspiracy theory nut job enough that I'm sure he doesn't want to touch it with a 1,000-foot pole. But maybe one day he'll talk about it. I don't know. I mean, he's talked about enough to get him in trouble. And why not? Why not? Why stop now? Who knows? Thank you again, Paul. You are an excellent guest. When your next book comes out, you gotta let me know because I've got to get you back on the show and I got to get a copy. So thank you, Paul.
You will, and hopefully you'll see something on the big screen someday and it has Paul. From the works of Paul Blake Smith. But who knows what the future holds? Things may get muddied up by another strike. That's something else that has held this up. And, it's one mess after another. But that's today's world.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Paul. Next Sunday, we will be back with Preston Denon, another returning guest, an excellent guest to get into the conversation of UFOs and aliens. If you don't know who Preston Denon is, oh, boy, just wait till next Sunday. That'll be another. I bet, Paul, you were great. I had Paul, another Paul on last Sunday. It's been a lot of alien stuff this month, and I love it. It's one of my favorite topics to get into, and we're going to continue on. I got guests booking into March. I'm working on more, trying to get this year booked up with great guests, trying to work it better at getting great guests like Paul. Like I said, thank you so much for coming back on. Thank you to everybody who shares out the show. Keep telling people about Paranormal Soup, where the weird happens live every Sunday night, 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. Central, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. Pacific Time. Check us out on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and also on the Paranormal Radio app, Talkstream, on the Paranormal Soup radio channel. Thank you to all of our patrons out there. $2 a month, $1 a month does help you give access to our private chat in there. You can get messages to me and help support the show. People, you can always support us on YouTube Super Chat. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. See you next week.